They are a new player in the game trying to educate fans on what is really happening in cricket. We have a partnership with them where we host live watch-alongs, do podcasts, and write articles. If you want to know what is really happening with our game, visit cricket8.com. If you make any content, Minvo Pro is the tool for you. Take your long format content and cut it and slice it for social media. This AI-inspired weapon will turn your one piece of work into so many clips. Try Minvo.pro now.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 12 of the Overthrows podcast. I'm Behram Kazi, who you can find at Def Mango. And with me, as always, is Jared Kimber, you can find everywhere. And he's, as usual, messing around with the stream.
I forgot to press the button, the proper button. Neither of us noticed this time.
Yeah. Usually I catch you doing that, but this time you slipped. We've got a fair few people in the comments already. Rupesh Gupta is here, Yash Parmar, Maiko Edits MC, Amar, Amit Thakur, Arko, Sheraton, KD, and DM. So hello to all of you guys. And as usual, we're going to have an IPL roundup. And before we even get to any of those games, Jared, 549 runs have been scored in a T20 fixture today, with the Sunrisers Hyderabad breaking their own record of 277, scoring 287 at the Chinnaswamy. And then RCB responded with 262 of their own. And how wild do you find this? Like, this is bizarre.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's, what's the best way of putting it? You were watching them bat, and there was a point at which Aiden Markram was batting slow and was chipping it around, where I was like, I don't think I would do that. I think if it was me right now and I was on the batting team, I'd be trying to hit every ball for six, because I kind of figured that pitch was just, and we saw it with the KKR, was it KKR Sunrisers game as well, the other one?
Yes.
No, Mumbai.
And then there was
Mumbai Sunrisers.
Yeah, Mumbai game. Yes.
Yeah. We saw it with that one as well, where you're just like, what's par, right? And so, when we're talking about what's par at 275, we've certainly gone into another world. And I just finished a piece about it. And so I looked at all the major leagues in the world. And so from 2011 to 2024, there's a 1.1 run jump. So 2011, which is about when all the leagues start to mature and get played properly, is 7.7, and then this year is 8.8 at the moment. Obviously, it's still early on. But there are dips in that. It's not like it's a straight line all the way up. But the IPL in the last 2 or 3 years, I think it might be now, is just going through the roof. And it's at 9.4, I think, this year. And the rest of cricket, all those other leagues, so PSL, Blast, CPL, and Big Bash, are at like 8.4, right? So at the moment, the scoring rates are absolutely, going nuts. Having said that, you might get some tricky wickets towards the back end of the year. You might get some collapses, all these sorts of things. Like, I kind of figured today that would be the sort of one where I thought RCB would collapse just because of the weight of the chase. But that doesn't even seem to happen anymore.
Not that the run rate element of things would help them at this point, because they are bottom of the table. I suppose let's touch on RCB first. And before we do that, just a reminder to everybody that you can find all of our written content, podcasts, and videos at goodareas.co. So go ahead and bookmark that website. And coming to RCB, they've lost both games this week. They've won a solitary game out of 7. They are bottom of the table. And forget not having a spinner. Their entire bowling lineup has gone to the dogs. They conceded 287 today versus the Sunrisers, and versus Mumbai, they posted 196, but Mumbai chased 197 in 15.3 overs. So they could have posted 250 that day and still lost that game. Glenn Maxwell can't buy a run and took a mental break from the game today. And, Cam Green, Alzari Joseph, Mohammad Siraj, they've all been dropped too. So it's gone terribly wrong for them this season. And even though the batters have done well, right? They've scored 458 runs in the last 2 games, and they've still lost both games. Faf scored 61 of 40 versus Mumbai, did better today, 62 of 28 versus Hyderabad. DK might even make the World Cup, right? Scored 53 of 23 unbeaten versus Mumbai, and then 83 of 35 today. We've seen him scoop, switch hit, show a lot of unorthodoxy, and also hit wonderfully down the ground. Rajat Patidar, he scored 4 sixes the other day in his 50 of 26. And Kohli, even though he was dropped early on, did break loose. He scored 42 of 20. So we've seen, RCB bat well. And today I kind of saw an approach that has been lacking a bit. At times I feel they're timid. And when they can bat like this, why not bat like this in all games, at least at the Chinnaswamy?
Look, I think we all kind of feel that way, right? I mean, they don't have a choice. It's probably already over, but they don't have a choice, right? As in, if they don't make whatever par is plus 10%, they're not even going to be close to some of these games, right? One of the games that you mentioned, going back where it was 15 overs that it was overhauled against Mumbai. I think that was the one. They have to be so far ahead of par because of their bowling. And let's be honest, Glenn Maxwell not being able to, not playing for them, probably hurts their bowling more. He's a better bowler than Will Jacks. He's got more experience than Will Jacks, and we don't know if Will Jacks is going to be sticking around all that long either. So it just keeps getting worse and worse. If Lockie Ferguson, and I thought Lockie, I know it's going to sound weird, but I thought Lockie bowled well at times, as much as anyone did at times. But Lockie and Reece Topley are going to have to do like 70% of the work. And then obviously Mohammad Siraj is going to have to get back to just an average season for him. But it's dire. It really is really bad looking at their lineup and the way that it goes. Batting, not an issue really. But you're right. I mean, the problem is that when you have a batting dominated side, you have to take more risks when you bat, which means that the fluctuation is an issue because you will be bowled out sometimes for 130 trying to get to 240. And that's why it's always better to have a consistent bowling lineup than a consistent batting lineup, because consistent bowling lineups always keep you in games. Consistent batting lineups win you games and then go missing.
Yeah. And I mean, when you look at that bowling attack, it's not like it doesn't have names that you think won't do well. Like Reece Topley, I like him. Lockie Ferguson has done well in years gone by. And, even Siraj and Yash Dayal, I mean, we were doing that preview for RCB prior to the IPL, and they were a really good power play bowling team. Remember, they were like in one complete end of the spectrum, the good end of the spectrum. And this year, it feels like no matter how much runs their batters score, it's never going to be enough. And I think that is the biggest Achilles heel. And honestly, I did not expect them to do really, really well this season, but bottom of the table in our 4th episode of Overthrows, did not expect that. No.
I think sometimes, especially in the IPL, if you get 2 or 3 players who lose form at the same time, you drop off massively. And this is the same for all these T20 leagues. I remember being with Scotland a couple of years ago when we qualified for the World Cup, but there was a point where it looked like we wouldn't qualify for the World Cup or we might struggle. And it was just a form thing. There was just a couple of guys who weren't in form at the right time, which meant that there was weaknesses that usually wouldn't be there. Mohammad Siraj Mohammad Siraj seems to have either great seasons or terrible seasons in the IPL. Yeah. He's got to find a way to have mediocre seasons, right? And, when it's not working for him, he's still good at one thing. And, Yash Giles always going to be up and down. The all-rounder thing, they tried to fix that, of course, right? They tried to fix that with Cameron Green, which brought other problems because that sort of stuffed up their batting lineup a little bit. They've been trying to use Cameron Green and Glenn Maxwell as a combined 4 overs. In this last game, they're trying to use Will Jacks and Lomraw as their 4 overs. Like, it's getting worse.
They brought Lomraw on versus Klaasen today, and I was like, what do we even do about this? Like what's happening?
He bowled a great over, by the way. I hope he tells his grandkids about the time he only went for 18 runs against Heinrich Klaasen. But yeah, so I think if you have, they didn't really have an all-rounder, and they didn't really have a strong bowling lineup coming in all the way through the innings, right? Those 2 things now look a lot worse than they did beforehand. And so you're in this situation of they probably don't feel all that comfortable about going all in with their batting because it's not a particularly long batting lineup. I don't even know how they decide who gets the ball in some cases because it's like, it's probably not going to matter. Just, I don't know, whoever puts their hand up the slowest gets to bowl the next over.
And Maxwell was one of their better bowlers, right? Their best spinner, and he wasn't even playing today. So we saw the results. And yeah, I personally don't see or foresee things getting better for RCB. It's quite the shit show. But anyway, let's move on to the Sunrisers. They, on the other hand, have won both their fixtures this week, in addition to breaking their newly set record of highest score ever in a franchise T20 game, which they set not too long ago. So they're clearly on a run. Travis Head brought out his belligerent best today. 50 of 20, 100 of 39, ended up with 102 of 41. Didn't spare anything short, even though people think that that's the way to go to him. But in the power play, that kind of aids him. And he was also aided by the monstrous Heinrich Klaassen, who scored 67 of 31. Abdul Samad also did well, smashing 37 of 10. And in the previous game, if you remember, 20-year-old Nitish Kumar Reddy scored 64 of 37, which was his first ever 50 in a professional game of T20 cricket. So the batting, you can say, is firing in all cylinders in this team. And it's basically helped them sneak into the top 4 over here because the bowling has been pretty dodgy.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Cummins has bowled well, but yeah, you know, and Booby hasn't been dreadful all the way through. Everyone else has had moments, I suppose, but yeah, it's not a strong bowling lineup. The difference between their batting and say RCB's is that they are set up to play the game in a way that can win the game with the bat. As in, you know, they started with Agarwal as opener. So they were like, okay, we're gonna do what Punjab do, but better, is my guess. It was the conversation. Which is we'll have one anchor and he'll anchor all the way through and then everyone will slog around him. And then they got in and Agarwal wasn't doing very well, and so Head becomes the anchor. But when your anchor can score at 160, 170 strike rate and not get out, right? And he will probably fail towards the back end of the series, but he hasn't really gotten out early all that much. Or he's gotten out early, but he's already on 80 or 100, so it doesn't matter, right? I think that just allows them, you know, if you look at Head and Klaassen and Markram, you've got 3 guys there that they're not like Andre Russell or Sunil Narine. They all could have seasons where they average 40, right? You know, consistent seasons where they average 40. So you're not as worried about them, you know, just slogging in the, you know, and having an off season where they average 18 and then you're really struggling. And outside of that, they've done very well at finding a bunch of kids or, you know, younger players who can come in and give you 25 off 15 type innings, right? Like Abdul Samad is not like a great player or anything, but in that role, he fits perfectly. And that allows for Markram or Klaassen sometimes to take a few extra balls because there's no balls being wasted. And so they can score 20, maybe even 25% more than par in some games. And it's set up to do that. The issue is on the other side of the ball, but if you're massively ahead of par, then you're in a position where you shouldn't lose all that many games, right? So it's interesting. It's still going to lose them some games. As I said, there's not as much consistency in batting as there is in bowling. So they will lose some games, but you can see why it's working at the moment, at least.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think one of the better things that they did as the season progressed is their top 3 was Mayank Agarwal, Abhishek Sharma, and Rahul Tripathi, and only Abhishek Sharma has retained his spot for good reason. He's a belligerent batter himself. And I think that has worked brilliantly for them. And also, you know, they are also a team like RCB who do not have a quality spinner, but Pat Cummins is just having an otherworldly season that has literally been no spinner, no problem for the Sunrisers with Captain Pat in this kind of form. 1 for 22 versus Punjab, 3 for 42, 3 for 43 in the run fest today versus RCB. And these performances were preceded by figures of 1 for 29, 1 for 28, 2 for 35 in another run fest, 1 for 32. He has not had a bad game. And I don't think anyone could have foreseen this, that Pat Cummins would just be on the button every single game. And he's been quite smart. The other day, he also came and bowled in the power play. And I think he went for like 4 runs in 2 overs and took a wicket. So he's literally not put a foot wrong. And that is also a, you know, key reason why Sunrisers are in playoff contention right now. Hell, they're in the playoff spot right now.
Yeah, I think he's always been a plus bowler when used correctly. I don't think he was always used correctly in the IPL, which part of the reason, you know, you buy a bowler like that and they don't see him bowl all that much. They're just like, we've got Pat Cummins, we'll get him to do this role, and it didn't really work for him. But as he's currently being used, he's using himself correctly because he understands his game a little bit more. And that means also that when there is a situation that he can come on and help them with, like bowling in the power play early on, he can do that as well. So look, it's a huge plus. If you would have told me he'd had a couple of good games, I wouldn't have been surprised. But the consistency of what he's been able to do, and it just shows you what a clever cricketer he is. It's, you know, if you go through his test career, the amount of times he's kind of changed what he does as a bowler and become successful with it, you know, straight away, it's not a surprise. A lot of it is probably coming off the back of that World Cup, which he wasn't good in. Everyone remembers the final game, but he wasn't a good bowler in that World Cup, right?
Yeah.
But he did spend a lot of time thinking about white ball cricket in a row in India, and then he came to the IPL. So I do think those sorts of things really do help quite a bit.
100%. And also winning so much silverware also kind of boosts your morale. And, he's gone for a lot of money. So he probably wants to validate that price tag as well. I see a lot of super chats coming in already. There are 4. And just to remind everybody that since the last Overthrows podcast, we kind of decided that we're going to tackle all super chats towards the end. So stay patient. We will answer all of them. Right now, we're going to continue and go to our next team. And since the last time we spoke on this show, Jared, Chennai has won another game since then. This time versus Mumbai at the Wankhede, which is arguably the IPL's most heavyweight clash. And Captain Ruturaj Gaikwad, he scored his second consecutive 50, this time much quicker. And he ended with 69 of 40. And Shivam Dubey, who I think has been Chennai's MVP this season, he scored an unbeaten 66 of 38, smashing both pace and spin for fun, much like Heinrich Klaasen in a way, but obviously not at that level. And Dhoni also wrecked Hardik Pandya in the final over, scoring 20 of 4, went unbeaten, had scored 3 mighty sixes of Hardik Pandya. And, the bowling also came off well. Tushar Deshpande with another good performance, 1 for 29. And my favorite, one of my favorite bowlers this season in all teams, the slinging pace demon, Mathisha Pathirana, who was returned from injury. And he took 4 for 28. He was right on the money. The pace was up. The accuracy was really, really good. And I feel like he ultimately won Chennai that game because Mumbai were batting well at one point. So the Super Kings are back to winning ways and are looking in good shape to defend their IPL title.
But if I remember correctly, you didn't rank them as highly as I did on the power list.
I went for KKR above CSK.
I think you had CSK fourth, didn't you?
No, I had them third.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's not how I remember it, but I'll trust you.
I'll tell you my rationale for that is because KKR won a game with their bowling, and we'll come to that later.
I do think that's interesting, but no, I think the two best teams are Rajasthan and CSK. I think they are very well balanced. I wonder if this season becomes a bit of a shootout if they're going to lose a couple of games to teams like Kolkata, Sunrisers. Just because those teams will score quicker than them. But I love the way they played against Mumbai because that was that kind of a game and they handled it really well. If Patharana isn't bowling wides and is still bowling his best balls without his worst balls, Mustafiza is bowling quite well. Deshpande, I don't even understand why he's doing so well. It's ridiculous.
I mean, the other day in his last over, Tushar Deshpande went for 2 runs and got a wicket. And I was just left dumbfounded. I was like, how?
He actually, I've seen this pattern before where bowlers get a lot of wickets and go for a lot of runs. And generally what happens afterwards is they start to fizzle out and they stop taking wickets one year, but the run rate keeps going. He's done the opposite in that he's now flipped it and he's got a good economy and his average probably isn't as good as what it has been before. I don't understand him as a cricketer at all. His best ball is incredible, and his worst ball is you. So, I don't understand. I don't understand really what is going on with him. I just like their team. I like their batting depth. I like the way they thought through that. Mumbai should have won that game easily against them, and against any other team in this league outside of Rajasthan, I think Mumbai just win that game. And yet Mumbai didn't even get all that close, in the end. And I think that shows a depth of skill, a depth of knowledge of the way they went about it. So I'm very much a very big fan of CSK. I haven't checked the comments on the power rankings. I never do because I'm just assuming it's fans of every fan base being angry their team is too high or too low. But I would assume there's probably a lot of people going, why is CSK so high? But it's based on what I have seen of their players and their squad and how it all fits together. The fact that they can still bring Tikshana back in at certain times. So, we talked about before that flexibility. They can make changes from a position of strength. So Moeen Ali and Daryl Mitchell is another. They can make that decision at any stage, and that's another. There's no wrong answers with those two players, right? Whereas you look at some of the other teams and you're just like, do you want Lomraw to be bowling your over, or or do you want Cameron Green getting smashed for 2 runs a ball, right? There's a big difference when you start to break it down like that.
Yeah, I mean, Ruturaj Gaikwad's form was a concern because he was, not batting quick enough and wasn't getting any runs. He's got runs now.
Mm.
We know what Rachin can do on his day. Like you mentioned, even if Daryl Mitchell isn't having the best of seasons, he can be easily replaced by Moeen. Dubey is one of my favorite players in all of India right now. Dhoni is rolling back the clock. And Pathirana and Mustafizur, these guys don't look as good for Sri Lanka and Bangladesh as they do for CSK, which is amazing. It
I will
really
say
is
this.
an
A lot of people say
enigma.
that about Partharana, but he averages like 17 when bowling for Sri Lanka in T20 internationals. I know he's gone for runs a couple of times, but it's like he's played 6 games in T20 internationals. He's looked pretty good. I think there's some bias there with that. I think Partharana is someone who is improving all the time. The way I saw him bowling against Mumbai is the best I've ever seen him bowl.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this kid has a very, very high ceiling. And, come T20 World Cup, he has to be one of the main assets for Sri Lanka. I don't see how they wouldn't pick him. Like, he's the fastest bowler ever from Sri Lanka, right? Like, no one has clocked 150 plus before. Anyway, let's come to Delhi now.
Malinga definitely went over 150, but yeah,
Hmm.
not as consistently, and
Yeah.
it also he slowed down quite early on as well. But I think Malinga did. But I think you're right. I think Partharana is probably still their quickest.
Yeah. Malinga is definitely the one who comes closest, and interestingly enough, they're both slingers. Anyway, let's come to Delhi. They beat Lucknow this week, so good week for them, and that's all thanks to Kuldeep Yadav, who, upon return from injury, removed KL Rahul, Nicholas Puran, and Marcus Stoinis. He returned figures of 3 for 20 and was aided well by Akshay Patel as well, who took none for 26. So the spinners did really well for Delhi, fast bowlers not so much. And then in the batting, young Jake Fraser McGurk, who replaced an injured Mitch Marsh in the 11, scored a 31 ball 50 on IPL debut and ended with 55 of 33. And he showcased his 6 hitting ability to the world because that kid can slog. He can really muscle it. And Captain Rishabh Pant also had a good day, 41 of 24. The question, though, Jared, remains how many times can Kuldeep bail this team out?
As you know, because I think you mentioned it previously, like they won a game when he wasn't available
Yeah.
as well, which I still think is a massive bonus. Like we might be looking back at that at the end of the year, being like, how on earth did they manage to win a game without him being available? But yeah, there's so many bowling lineups. It's funny how Rajasthan and Chennai have managed to have so many plus bowlers, and you look at the other teams, and it's like, what, Gujarat has a plus bowling lineup, right?
Yeah.
And is that it? Are they the 3 of the 10 teams at the moment? And you could say it's a batting tournament, and everyone's making runs, so the bowlers don't look as good. But the point being that Delhi, they are so reliant on Kuldeep having a good game, and he's just come back from injury. He played fine. Hopefully, he plays for the rest of the season. He's still probably only going to win them 1 in 2, 1 in 3 games at absolute best. So they're still going to be nowhere near the finals, right? And I mean, it's a huge risk. We've seen some teams. Mumbai with the young South African kid whose name I always forget, and
Kwena
Mapaka, and Fraser McGurk. You're talking about players who are not solid in their level yet.
Yeah.
Right. And we are like, as in an IPL, just tossing them in there. That shows you how poor those teams are going to be able to do that. And we saw with Mapaka, we can tell his best ball is fine. And we can tell he's got the temperament for this level, and he probably has the pace and everything. But he doesn't know what to do when people are strong-arming him back over his head, because that doesn't happen in under-19 cricket. And Fraser McGurk has hit a bunch of sixes early on. We've never seen him be massively consistent from game to game, right? So if this is a harder level in conditions he's not used to, maybe he's good once in every 5 games, or maybe they're lucky and they just catch fire and he goes on a run. But if that's what you're relying on, it's not particularly great, right?
I mean, Fraser McGurk's first 2 scoring shots for sixes. Then he actually slowed down a lot. When I say a lot, I mean like 11 and 20 odd balls. And then he faced Krunal Pandya. 6s and 4s. It was raining, literally, boundaries. And I mean, I like what I see with Fraser McGurk, but obviously, like, it's too early. And a lot of people are saying that he should be in Australia's T20 World Cup squad. Well, I don't know about that because with Delhi, one thing I appreciate about them is that they really like push youngsters forward. We've seen them do this in the past. That's been their strategy, and they've been consistent with it. And I hope that Fraser McGurk can, develop quickly as a result of getting some game time in the IPL. But T20 World Cup, I mean, that's literally around the corner. Can't happen, right?
I remember having a conversation with Jeff Lemon where I said David Warner his last game for Australia will be at the T20 World Cup. If that's where he wants to go out. And Lemon was saying, what if another player comes through the Big Bash? And I was like, do you know how good that player would have to be to knock David Warner out of the starting 11? It's not just a talented player that you're talking about at that point. You're talking about thinking, well, Warner could average 40 with a strike rate of 150, and we're so confident someone else is going to bat in the top order ahead of him. You've got Head, you've got Warner, you've got Green in that top three, probably in the top two, and Mitch Marsh at 3. Would you take Fraser McGurk? Right? I probably say you don't, but I can see why he might go in the squad, but I can't see how he starts ahead of any of those guys. Green is obviously has added bowling and was being used in the wrong spot by RCB. Warner's still Warner, and as far as I'm aware, Warner's still available for that tournament. And so I couldn't see that happening. And Head is obviously, I mean, you would almost say Head is the most automatic choice at the moment for that position, right? So I don't think Fraser McGurk's about to get into that squad. But if he goes on a rampage all the way through the IPL and he ends up averaging 40 at a strike rate of 180, I'm more than willing to say, well, now at that stage, he's had some success in the Big Bash, not masses, but some success, and he's done an IPL. You might go, well, if this is a next level talent, and so many people in Australia are telling me he is, then why not throw him in? But this is a good one for you, Mohammed Harris. I remember when everyone was going nuts about Mohammed Harris, and when we saw him at the higher level, it was quite clear that he did have some limitations, and it did not take long for international teams to work that out. That's not to say that Mohammed Harris is never going to be a great player. What it means is sometimes you do that, and then other times you play for a little bit, and it takes the teams a little bit of a while to work you out. But it's not automatic, and I don't think Australia probably feel like they need to do that, but maybe as a backup where. I don't know how many different positions he can bat and how confident they are in him, but maybe you just go, look, we'll just take him as a spare bat, and if we need to press the panic button, he's the panic button.
Perhaps, because we'll obviously get to Mitch Marsh's injury in Uncovered, but that could be a potential role. Hope that doesn't happen, but he could be a crisis sort of pick over there. And I mean, this kid has scored the fastest ever list A100. I think that's his claim to fame prior to the Big Bash. I just feel like Caribbean surfaces just too soon for him, right? We've seen him struggle versus spin already. Like he couldn't get a bat under ball versus Bishnoi. So let's see how the rest of his IPL goes.
I'd be shocked if he's in the Australian squad based on everything. But he seems to me like a sort of person that his record doesn't mean as much because they know what his ceiling is. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Fair enough. Gujarat is up next, who ended Rajasthan's unbeaten streak this week in what was arguably the best game of this week, I would say. It had to take something special to defeat the league leaders, and that something special was Rashid Khan, who first took 1 for 18 in his 4 overs and really probably deserved more wickets had it not been for Matthew Wade's glove work. And then he came out to bat, smashed an unbeaten 24 of 11 alongside Tewatia, who scored 22 of 11. And Captain Shubman Gill also performed well in this game, 72 of 44 for him. So after 2 defeats in a row, Gujarat won a big game, which keeps them in playoff contention. And, like you mentioned earlier, Rajasthan, Chennai, Gujarat, and maybe Lucknow. Those are the only plus bowling sides we can see in this tournament thus far.
Lucknow's not too bad. Yeah. It's maybe slightly below I'd have them as 4th off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I think that's a good call.
Yeah. Same for me. I think if with Mayank Yadav, they have a shot at maybe...
Mayank Yadav might be different, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, when I look at Gujarat, it's just that Shubman Gill or bust with the bat, particularly when David Miller is injured. And, Rashid has had a wonderful game. If he can continue to deliver a few more of these, who knows? Playoff spot is very much on.
My memory of that game was that Rashid and Noor Ahmed, and I can't remember if it was Mohit or one of the other seamers, created like a bunch of chances and half chances and Sampson and Rian Parag kept hitting the ball straight up in the air and it just didn't go in the right spots. You know, all the sorts of things that happen. If, as you said, Matthew Wade had taken that, if they'd fielded a little bit better in general, I think they would have won that game quite easily. So in the end, they got to a point where it was far more random than it ever should have been, I suppose, is the way of putting it. And they kind of, you know, maybe it looked like they stole a game that actually they should never have been in a position to have to steal, is the way that I was looking at it. But you're right. I think all things considered, they were, they do have a very good bowling lineup. My worry with their batting is they have so many batters that seem to get caught at one pace, and it needs to be Shubman Gill or David Miller. David Miller's not currently fit. Hopefully he's coming back soon. And Shubman Gill, if Shubman Gill had actually faced more balls in that last game, because he was in for ages but didn't face that many balls. If he faced more balls, they probably again would have won that game a little bit easier, because he was doing fine for big parts of that game. But yeah, I think there's clearly an issue with the batting, and I'll tell you why I've got the biggest issue with it, because I think their batting has a lot of anchors and a lot of guys who get stuck. But on the other side of the ball, I think they have a lot of very good defensive bowlers. And so the issue is that their bowlers will keep the economy down, but they won't take wickets. If you have like an anchor-led batting lineup and you have wicket takers on the other side, that matches up a lot better. The same way as if you have a really attacking batting lineup and you have defensive bowlers, those things match up better. So the format of it isn't quite perfect, and they're still way too dependent on Gill and Miller. But I do like their bowling. I'm 100% with you. I'm interested to see where their bowling will be by the end of the year and how they go. And they tried. I think there's some interesting parts to what they can do, I suppose.
Yeah, last week we mentioned how, or both of us agreed on the fact that post power play, their bowling is great. And MItch Sharma has had 2 very bad weeks. He's not going to continue to have very bad weeks, I think. So I said this last week, I'll say it again. They need to produce Turners in Ahmedabad because their batting is already very anchory. And if they can then play Sai Kishore with the Afghan spin duo and Mohit, I think that's your winning formula right there, Gujarat.
Yeah,
if you're listening to this, do it.
So I don't know, how much people understand, that's a good tactic, what you've just said. But essentially if you can do that and you can win 70% of your games at home and you win 50% of your games away from home, you're probably going to make the finals every year or be in touching distance of the finals every year, right? It's that simple. And if you can get it up to 80% at home, right? It's massive. And then all you need to do is split the games on the road. And that is the best way to be consistently good in T20 cricket, right? And teams don't often use that enough. So I think that is a perfectly reasonable thing to look for them.
Yeah, and let's see how they fare, because I'm keeping a keen eye on this team, because just can't tell where they'll end up. I feel like they could be in, a chance for the playoffs, but then again, there are times where I feel like, nah. Anyway, at that note, we are through with half of the teams. Let's take a short break. For all of you who are with us, stay with us. You're watching Overthrows with Behram and Jared, and we'll be back after this short ad.
Sometimes you just need to take the slips out and bowl defensively. And you also need to be careful with your computer's defense as well. If you need a VPN, go Nord. NordVPN.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. So put in some dot balls and turn them into maidens via NordVPN.com/Kimber.
Welcome back to Overthrows. You guys are with Behram and Jared. And let's come to the Rajasthan Royals now. They might have lost to Gujarat, but they defeated Punjab without the services of Joss Butler, Nandre Berger, Ravichandran Ashwin, and Sandeep Sharma. Keshav Maharaj came into the side and delivered 2 for 23 versus Punjab, and Trent Bolt, who had only bowled 2 overs versus Gujarat, went for 8 runs in that game. I was a touch surprised how he didn't at least bowl 3, but he came back versus Punjab and returned figures of 1 for 22 and was quite stellar. Ultimately, however, it was Shimron Hetmeyer's cameo, 27 of 10 towards the end, that sealed the game for Rajasthan, which got quite nervy. And they'll take heaps of confidence from this win because, so many of their starters were not playing.
I think that was one of our big concerns, right? I kept saying, I just thought their depth wasn't as good as some, compared to Chennai, I suppose, is really what I'm saying, because there's a few other teams with dodgy depth. But look, they still probably need their top three to step up. Samson's been fine, but Jaiswal and Butler, Butler's played the one innings, got no issues with their bowling. They're always going to be kind of slightly shorter on batting because they don't have that all-rounder position. But that was a good professional win. Like you would take that any time. And we talk about the Delhi stealing a win before. We've seen a couple of teams steal wins when they shouldn't have. And Rajasthan to me still looked like the best team overall. So I think they've got one loss so far. And that was the game we were just talking about, which they had plenty of chances to win that one as well, of course, even if they shouldn't have. If you're being a little bit, I don't want to say nervy with them, but they are 5-1, and they do have 1, 2, 3 games come down right to the end, and they're 2-1 in those. They could easily be 0-3 in those, or 3-0 in those, right? I think we all think they're really good, but teams are pushing them a fair way.
Yeah. And I mean, one good thing that's happening for Rajasthan, I'd say, of course, they did win a game that they were destined to lose without all of those players. But if you look at Jaiswal, like you mentioned, hasn't really come off with the bat at all. Had a 30-odd score recently, but that was pretty much it. And Butler, barring the 100 that he scored, has been pretty bad. So even though those two are failing, you've seen Sanju step up, right? He's got 3 50s this season already. The most recent one coming off 31 deliveries. I think he got an unbeaten 68 of 38, something like that. And I saw a lot of unorthodoxy from Sanju, and he was smashing it, quite ferociously through extra cover. That's definitely an area of strength for him. And then Rayan Parag, someone who I think you mentioned was averaging 19 in the season gone by, right? Or seasons gone by. He's also got 350s in this season, and he scored 76 of 48 versus Gujarat. So these two performing consistently, in 6 games, they've got 350s each. That somewhat does take the pressure off your Butlers, Hetmeyers, and even Jaiswals, who still, just Jaiswal in particular, hasn't fired properly.
Yeah, we talked about them having 4 players I trusted. If you throw Parag in, it's 5, and 2 of those haven't really done all. I know it's weird to say that because Butler played a great 100, but outside of that, obviously, didn't look quite the same. I think because the reason I harp on about their batting a little bit more than others is it's not as long as other teams, and so you really want.
Kotian was opening for them. He scored 24 of 31. And if it was not for that Hetmeyer innings, which offset that innings, they would have lost, right?
I forgot about the Kotian innings. I don't know if I still don't know if he was sending as a pinch hitter or a pinch blocker. It was a remarkable moment. But again, that tells you they don't really trust their batting. And that's even with Rayan Parag doing really well, right? I know Butler wasn't playing in that game, so there was an element of that to it as well. And Ashwin, which I suppose thins out their batting even more. But yeah, I think there are questions. I think they're going to probably be in the top 2 places by the end of the season. I don't think they're going to lose a great deal of games all the way through the year unless they keep up with this current injury run. And so I think they'll make it to the end of the year. But I think it's fair to still have questions about them in the same way that we should about Chennai and some of the other teams up the top.
Plus, there is always that case or that fear of peaking too soon, which I do have.
I don't know about that. I think, I mean, you can't control that anyway. Do you know what? It's one of those things we always say, right? And you said it last week about, I can't remember if it was them or someone else.
I think it was them.
Yeah, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. But what does Kumar Sangakkara do? Go in and go, guys, can you play a little bit worse for the next couple of games to save your form for later? Like, do you know what I mean? There's nothing you can do about that. Whereas the other issues, I think that's good. And maybe getting by in a couple of close games is quite interesting to them. Is quite good for them because in the finals, you're probably going to win, you might have to go through at least one dogfight, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I just hope that they get Nandre Berger back, because as good as Kuldeep Sen was in his first 3 overs, took 3 wickets and all, he was quite bad afterwards. And I just feel like with the new ball, Bolton Berger, that is probably my pick for best new ball pair this entire IPL. So I
I
think
think you
that
just
that
like
could
it
be,
because it's Bolton Burger and it's
yeah.
alliterative.
Bolton Burger
No,
could
is that
be a
alliterative?
franchise. It
I
could
think
be
it's
a fast food franchise, Bolton Burger,
I'm in.
you know? Or Burger and Bolt, whatever. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about Mumbai now. They beat RCB, but then lost to CSK in a big game. And Rohit Sharma's 61 ball 100 was the talk of the town. He carried his bat in that innings, scored 105 off 63 in a losing cause versus arch rivals Chennai. And Hardik Pandya's performances are not getting better. And his captaincy is receiving a lot of flack as well. Tough times for Mumbai supporters. And even though I do think that they, are still in with a shout. I think that they have the batting to kind of win them games on their own. I think Hardik's form is a concern. And I don't know what to make of Rohit's 100, because I do feel like, in the context of the game, if you're getting to 50 off 30, your next 50 should be off 20 or 25, not off 31, based on all of the work that we do at Good Areas.
I mean, you're right. I think he just got tired, which
That too.
sometimes you get tired and there's not much you can do. I also do think in that game, if you go back, is so everyone went on and on about Dhoni hitting the sixes at the end.
Yeah.
Brilliant batting, don't get me wrong, but one of the reasons I think he found it easier to hit that ball was because they'd replaced it and it was a harder ball. And that didn't happen in the Mumbai innings. And if you look before Dhoni hit those sixes, there was a slowdown there with Chennai as well. And I think there was a slowdown with Mumbai. So I think the combination of the fact it got harder to hit the balls, it got a little bit soft, and he got tired. I don't think you can really have a go at a guy who's made 100 off 60 balls when you're chasing 205. Like the rest of the team, especially the way their team is set up. Like if you were to say, we're going to get a par 100 in this innings, and then we have Tim David, and I mean, because we were doing that one on Cricket 8, and it was like, well, there's still Tim David to come, there's still Mohammad Nabi to come, there's still Romario Shepherd to come, right? And there's still Hardik Pandya to come. We kept going through the names, going, they're so far ahead of this. I think Chennai have to get a lot of credit for what they did in that particular game as well. But when it comes down to it, I don't think he is the issue. Hardik bowling himself when I didn't think he was fit. He bowled 1 over that didn't go for runs, but I didn't think he bowled that particularly well, and 2 overs where he got hammered. And then he brought himself in ahead of Tim David. There are many times to bring Hardik Pandya in ahead of Tim David. One would be is if there's a leg spinner around, right? Or lots of spin that needs to be bowled. There was never going to be any more spin bowled from that point.
That's true.
Tim David at Wankhede, if he was 10 off 10, he could have then been 40 off, 17 or something, or 16, completely caught up and could have gotten back ahead of the rate. The Hardik Pandya that exists right now does not look like he's about to do that, right?
He scored 2 of 6 as well, so that's an over for 2 runs. And I think
that was it. That was great. They never recovered from that, right? And no one's everyone gets stuck at the start of their innings and everything else. But he made decisions in that game when it came to the bowling and when it came to batting, which was an issue. Also, just in the bowling in general, like if you're reliant on Hardik Pandya and Romario Shepherd to bowl 2, 3, 4, 5 overs, and I mean Hardik Pandya as he is currently fit, rather than Hardik Pandya at his absolute best, you're going to go for a bunch of runs. It doesn't look particularly good to me. They're an exciting team, but yeah, it looks a little bit dodgy at times, and that's why they're 2 and 4, and I think they've played a lot of home games, haven't they? So chances are it's not going to get all that much better for them.
And also, a lot of the commentators were questioning Hardik's decision of not bringing Mohammad Nabi back on. I think Lara said it, KP said it, Sunny G said it. But Shivam Dubey was batting. It was a tough call, but Nabi had bowled pretty well up until that point. 3 overs, none for 19.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Shivam Dubey is either going to go out or score 20 runs off that over, right? And so you have to think as a captain, is that what you're prepared to do? And he was obviously not prepared to do that. I think myself and Rob Barron and I think Jack Hope might have been doing that. What we were saying is that we had no problem with the tactical side of that, right? But once he made that decision, they were further behind than where they should have been, and bowling himself for the 20th over, all those sorts of things. But the truth is that it's not a very good bowling attack, and maybe that's the day you just go, we're just going to have to ride the guy in form, even if it's a bad matchup. And he's maybe not quite ready to think that yet. And sometimes that's how it's as simple as that sometimes. That the captain's like, no, I do have other bowlers. And it's like, man, we have Romario Shepherd.
We're going to cover Hardik's woes in Mumbai later on and uncovered as well. But overall, when I look at Mumbai, like I think they were at their best. At least the batting was when they played RCB, right? Ishan Kishan also scored 69 of 34, and then Sky, who has scored a 17-ball 50 sandwich between two ducks. He scored 52 of 19 in that game. And, you add Tim David to the mix and you expect Pandya to come good at some point. I feel like the batting is enough. And Bumrah is enough. I mean, he was fantastic versus RCB. 5 for 21. Got Kohli, was on a hat-trick twice. And he even followed that up with none for 27 versus CSK. Even though you'd have to say maybe CSK had the better end of that deal because they didn't lose a wicket to Bumrah. But I just feel like without Bumrah, or even with him, the rest of the bowling has just looked a bit too flat. I mean, Coetzee has been good in patches. He hasn't been good consistently. Yeah. And that's it.
That's it. Yeah. And that one Mohammad Nabi spell you just mentioned, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And we know Nabi can bowl those kinds of spells, but we also know he can't bowl all the time and he will get hammered from, on occasions. I think their batting at its absolute best is not quite at the Sunrisers level or Kolkata's level, but it's in that kind of, it can spoil any party. But I think their bowling is I think their bowling is anywhere from 10% to 20% under par on the regular, which is remarkable with the best bowler in his best form in this tournament. But the truth is, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen in the past as well, I think the first game when Bumrah took, 3 for 14 or something like that, they still lost that game. So he had to take a fifer for them to win. And that just goes on to show you how reliant that bowling attack is on Bumrah. And again, still no spinner as such. I mean, Mohammad Nabi's all right, but Shreyas Gopal has replaced Piyush Chawla, and I'm just still not sold over there. But anyway, enough on Mumbai. Let's move on. And the last time when we spoke about KKR on the show, well, since then, they've only played once. And that rarely ever happens in an IPL season. But they defeated Lucknow at the Eden Gardens. And while Phil Salt's blazing unbeaten 89 of 47 was amazing to watch, and he is one of my favorite English batters currently, it was the bowlers who won Kolkata that game. Mitch Starc finally delivered with 3 for 28 in his 4 overs, and his final over at the death was, spectacular. I think 6 runs for 2 wickets. And then Sunil Narayan in his 4 overs gave away 17 singles and took a wicket, which was really, I don't even have words for that spell. And it feels to me, and this is why I had them ahead of CSK in the power rankings, right? It feels to me that if this team can get its bowling right more frequently, which we have a little bit of evidence for now, because, Vaibhav Arora has been good in patches, as has Harshit Rana. I feel like they can be proper contenders just if they get that bowling right more frequently.
Yes. I mean, Sunil Narayan's probably not going to make runs all year. The Phil Salt innings was remarkable, and the Shreyas Iyer innings. It was some of the messiest, stupidest cricket I've ever seen. And, of course, we'll talk about Shamal Joseph, I'm sure, when we get to Lucknow. But that was a crazy chase where I kind of felt for a long period that they would still find a way to stuff it up. They ended up getting there really comfortably, but that wasn't always that comfortable. But yeah, Mitchell Starc, I think at the moment, at this stage in his career with the skills he has, is an elite bowler against players who can't handle him, right? And I know that sounds stupid, but he's going to get hit by really good players more than a normal bowler of his quality, because I don't think he swings the ball the way that he used to, and I don't think people fear him the way that they used to. But when he goes up against the number 6, number 7, number 8, he should be close to unplayable, because they're never going to come up against someone who is releasing the ball from that height at that pace with the left arm. So if they can get wickets early on, and it's Chakravarti and Andre Russell, and obviously, Harshit, if those 3 guys can, even if they go for more runs than they should, but can get between them 5 to 6 wickets, Mitchell Starc can still be Mitchell Starc. The issue is that I don't think he can get a lot of early wickets, at least consistently. And Sunil Narine doesn't get wickets. So it really does have to be all those other guys performing above their normal wicket-taking ability. Then it becomes a good bowling lineup. The problem with that is that's a lot of pressure on a lot of guys who, like Chakravarti doesn't look like he's bowling particularly well. Andre Russell, the problem with him is he gets whacked out of the attack quite regularly. And, Harshit is bowled well at times, but, he's not ready to be a consistent wicket-taking threat. So if all those things happen and Sunil Narine continues to be Sunil Narine, but he won't get wickets, I can see some good things. But I think that's a lot that still has to go right for them if you compare that to the other better teams. That's why I had them ranked lower than Chennai, because I don't think there's that many things that need to go right for Chennai.
True. That is fair. And I mean, when you did send in your power rankings, I did reconsider as well, but it was too late by that point. But anyway, I have a hot take on Kolkata. I think they should replace Chakravarti with Suyash Sharma. I don't know why they haven't done that yet. And watch Chakravarti get a fifer now that I've said this.
Well, Rob Barron on Cricket 8 has been saying the same thing all the way through. I think when you have a player of Chakravarti's talent, you probably give them 2 or 3 extra games because, it's the sort of thing that like, oh, he hasn't worked. And then we let him go this year. And then next year he takes 83 wickets for Lucknow or something, right? And you're like, So I can understand them giving him an extra go. But having seen both of them bowl this year, and Suyash Sharma only bowled like in 1 game, I want to say, or 2 games. It wasn't much.
I think just the first one, probably.
Yeah, I think you're right. But having watched them both bowl, I can tell you which one I think is in better form.
Yeah, fair enough. Anyway, over to Punjab now. They lost both games this week, and the real fake Shashank Singh nearly bailed them out once again. He scored an unbeaten 46 of 25 versus the Sunrisers, and young Ashutosh Sharma has been mad impressive, right? He scored 33 not out of 15 versus the Sunrisers and 31 of 16 versus Rajasthan. He has consistently, hit the ball well at the death and has proven to be a real, useful commodity in that lower order as far as the batting is concerned, particularly for someone who's just come in. But the rest of the batting has failed miserably, particularly Johnny Bairstow. Johnny Bairstow, ever since he landed in India, is having a nightmare, right? And the Whack House team of the IPL, as we named them in the last Overthrows podcast, they're now, playing the way we expect them to play, basically.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about this. So I had them above, I reckon, Delhi, Mumbai, and RCB on my power list. I can't remember where you had them.
I think I had them above Delhi and RCB.
You had them above Delhi and RCB. Okay. And so the reason I had them where I did is they lost 1 game with 1 ball remaining. Sorry, they won 1 game with 1 ball remaining. Then they lost a game by 2 runs and another game with 1 ball remaining with what? Yeah. 7 wickets down or whatever it was against Rajasthan. And
I mean, they nearly chased it versus the Sunrisers, and versus Rajasthan, you could make a case that they should have won that game after a certain point, right?
Exactly. And so I feel like I have watched them play good cricket. I also, if you were to say to me that it's all about to fall apart and go horribly wrong, I'm also completely on side with you with that. Do you know what I mean? So it's not as if I think they're massively better than Delhi or Mumbai or RCB or anything like that. But I think they have been playing good cricket. And whereas some of the, Mumbai, I think is the only other one of those bottom 4 teams where I'm like, they have been playing good cricket. The difference is that with Punjab, I kind of feel like they could be okay on either side of the ball. Whereas with Mumbai, it's kind of Bumrah and then batting. So I'm not massively against them or anything, but they put a lot of faith in Johnny Bairstow and Shikhar Dhawan making runs for them. One of them's injured and the other one was injured and hasn't come back from his last injury, if we're being honest. And so it does look kind of thin. Sam Curran batting at number 4, if from a tactical point of view, I'm like, oh, I can understand that. But it feels like he's batting at number 4 from a necessity point of view. That's a little bit more of an issue, although I think he's been bowling better. But they still have that problem that Rabada, Curran, and Arshdeep are kind of all overlap with each other. They've got 1 spinner who they never want to bowl out. Like, there's just little things with them where you're just like, oh,
never.
They just don't look very clever the way that they plan their team or implement their strategy. But I actually think they've been playing the last 3 games. I think they've been playing really, really good cricket. I don't think they're going to get anywhere near a playoff spot.
Fun fact about the only spinner who is good, Harpreet Brar. He is a left arm orthodox spinner who is better versus left-handed batters as opposed to right-handed batters. So good luck explaining that one, guys. But
Can I just tell you a story about that? That came up on the graphic last week that Varun made during one of our scoreboards. And like in the middle of the show, I had to stop and go, wait, has he done a typo? Like, is this, because it was so baffling to me, and I've seen it before. Mitch Santner was one who had that record for a long period as well. But you just look at it going, wait, what?
Yeah, absolutely. And, when I look at their batting, I know that you think that they've played really good cricket, but I feel like if you take Shashank and Ashutosh out, they haven't really with the bat.
No, I mean, I think they're terrible, and those two guys have been good. I don't think, when I say they've played good cricket, I don't think they're a good side. I don't think they're well put together. But they've been able to put pressure on teams with the bat at times, and their bowling kind of has just got by. But if you think of Ashutosh, Livingston, and Shashank, that is actually quite an interesting middle punchy order. If Bairstow or Shikhar Dhawan did anything with that, suddenly it's a really interesting side, right? Even Sam Curran, if he can make his 60s off 40s, right? Which it looks like at the moment he might be able to get them a couple. With everything else that they have, they're not a good team. They're not well put together. They're not very smart about what they do. I don't really understand them. There are currently, you can find bookmakers, Bayram, where they're 130 to 1 to win the tournament already. I'm talking up a bad team because in the last 3 games, they have been competitive. That's the best I can give them.
Yeah, and it's just, I think that I said this about them last week as well, that I think this team just hasn't come together as a unit and they rely on individual brilliance. I can say that for their batting, and even with the ball, we saw some isolated performances. Arshdeep took 4 for 29. Rabada took 2 for 18 versus Rajasthan, in which his last 2 overs went for 6 runs and he took 2 wickets in them. That's how good he was, right? And Curran, even in that game, took 2 for 25. So we've seen them kind of do well in patches, in isolation. But I suppose Harshal Patel has had such a shocker that he kind of nullifies everything.
It's not ideal, no.
Yeah. Anyway, last team of the day, Lucknow Supergiant. And this is a team that has lost both games this week. And they even failed to defend a score of 160 plus at home, which was their thing. And now they've lost their thing. That happened versus Delhi. Mike Yadav is still injured, and of course, they're missing him big time. And while Mohsin Khan, who himself returned from injury, he stepped up, right? He was fantastic versus KKR, took 2 for 29, in which his 2 power play overs went for 8, and he took both wickets in those overs as well. Barring Mohsin, and you could put Ravi Bishnoi in there as well. He took 2 for 25 versus Delhi and was frugal versus KKR as well. Barring those two, there's not much to write home about with respect to the ball. And they tried Shamar Joseph, right? And we were all excited to see Shamar Joseph. All eyes were on him. First over in the IPL goes for 22 runs and it has 10 extras in it. Ends up with none for 47. And you could say he was a bit unlucky. Some of those catches, had they been
definitely
caught,
unlucky.
Yeah, he would have ended up with a wicket or 2, but it just wasn't their week.
His best ball looked absolutely IPL worthy.
He was cutting people in half.
Yeah, and I Phil Salt defended him when Phil Salt was like 30 off 13 or something, and you're just like, that is not a Phil Salt decision. Phil Salt has realized that this ball is too good to do anything else against. Shreyas Iyer came in and tried to knock the ball around and had to almost give up because of some of the deliveries. Whether we're talking about a Mapaka type situation or a Jake Fraser McGurk type situation, we don't know, right? But Shamar Joseph didn't look like he knew what to do. And I think, if I remember correctly, Puran was talking him through almost every delivery. And that's because this guy hasn't played in T20 cricket, right? Like, he's not ready for this. But without Mayank Yadav, it kind of makes sense to get him to bowl. The problem is, you are going to get some really expensive overs. If he took 4 for 14 in the next game, I would shrug my shoulders and be like, that seems about fair. That's kind of where he is as a talent at the moment.
Yeah. And I mean, whilst I think we have been quite critical right now of their bowling because Mayank's not around, and even with Mohsin and Bishnoi doing well, they couldn't really turn up. I think it's the batting that's truly let them down this week. Only 2 performances of note. Ayush Badoni, he scored 55 of 35 versus Delhi, and he rescued Lucknow from a position where they were 94 for 7, and he took them to 167 for 7, right? And then this is a team which to me looks like Nicholas Pooran or bust. He was cleaned up by Kuldeep on the first delivery the other day. And then he scored 45 of 32, but didn't receive any support from his teammates. And also JL's persistence with Marcus Stoinis and the weird way in which he's using him, I am baffled by it. Like, sub him in for, or well, sub Ashton Turner in for him if you don't want to bring Kyle Mayers in, even though Kyle Mayers would be my pick. And I've said this like 10,000 times, but I just don't get it. Like, what is Marcus Stoinis' role in this team?
Yeah, it's a bit baffling. But also Badoni, like if you look at Stoinis and Badoni, what is their jobs in this team at the moment? Because I couldn't tell you. So Badoni bats down the order and does really, really well. And you're like, oh, that's an interesting guy. They've got
Badoni is the batter when all the batters are done. That's who he is.
And then the next game they threw him up the order and he looked completely confused of what am I supposed to be doing here? And he's a young player. Just give him one job. And just say, this is your job for the rest of the year. Do this, and we will work out. Like, if you want to move Stoinis around, I'm like, okay, right? But don't move both of them around. It's a baffling system that they seem to have. I just don't really understand it. But you're right. I mean, their bowling is... Shimar Joseph made it look worse the other day, whereas actually I thought most of their bowlers, even him, bowled really well after that first over. And then it was too late. And once Phil Salt didn't bat particularly well. He just got away with it. Shreyas Iyer was all over the place in his innings. But once they got on top, they just rolled, which is what KKR is going to do. That's fine. But their batting is the issue. It's this whole thing of we can defend anything over at 160. It's like, great. Can you make over 180? Well, how about that? Have we thought about that?
That's true. And I mean, just on the Stoinis thing again, if you want to play him in the top order like he has in a few games, bring Mayers in. If you want to play him in the middle order, bring Ashton Turner in. I just don't get it. But anyway, one good thing about Lucknow this week was that kit. And I don't know if you know the story behind it, but Kolkata's or India's maybe even oldest football club, Mohan Bagan, those were their colors, the maroon and green. And that's because the Lucknow owners also have a stake in that football team. So
I knew it was a football kit. I didn't realize that it was complete. I'm fine with that. I think, going forward, it's having multiple kits is what most sports do, right? And also you're playing some shots with your kit. I think is a really, really cool thing. And occasionally it's going to go horribly wrong. But the biggest issue we have is one of the few kits that's ever worn by anyone is still the 1992 Pakistan kit. Like, as in, like when someone's trying to wear a kit that's cool. And it's like, shouldn't we be better than that? Like, football and, basketball have done much better at that sort of stuff. And I just think we can be better. And there are some good kits. And I know you and I are doing a Crick Picks about this soon. But there needs to be more good kits, I suppose, is the best way of putting it.
Yeah. I mean, I look at Lucknow's regular kit and I think that one was just better. And I mean, it's different, right? We've got too many blue teams, right? So I don't know. If someone from Lucknow is listening to this, the Super Giants, please make that your official home kit. Anyway, that wraps up our IPL roundup. Varun over here in the comments is actually saying Shamar played 2 T20s before the KKR game. And yes, we have spoken
2 T20s in his life. What are you talking about, Varun? When I say he's never played T20 before, I don't mean a single game. I mean, he's playing in the biggest league in the world and he has played 2 professional games. What on earth? This is the third time we've seen this year. We are seeing teams panic where you're just like, are there not experienced players out there that can do some of this? Like, I don't really understand all the different reasons that this has happened. Like, for instance, Mumbai have another bowler they could use over all their left arm seamers. They have a backup. Delhi don't need to try a young Australian who is still finding his way. If you're finding yourself as a team constantly doing this, you have to start asking at a certain point, are you trying to win? Are you trying to groom players for the future? What are you trying to do?
Yeah. And just on Shamar, I think Varun, you could see in his bowling, right? It was very one-dimensional. It's not like he had a lot of variety. And like Jared said, best ball was great. Hit that length and get it to, cut the batters in half. And we've seen him do that in Test cricket as well. But does he have a slower one? Does he have a slow bouncer? Does he have a wide Yorker? Like, those are things that you'll need in T20 cricket, which is why, the jury's still out. The jury never even sat for Shamar Joseph, right? It's still underway. But anyway, that wraps up the IPL roundup. We'll be taking a short break. You guys are watching Overthrows with Jared and Behram. Stay tuned for some international cricket news after this short break.
If you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months, plus gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a blocker protects the stumps with NordVPN today.
Celebrate your cricket heroes with Bodyline t-shirts. Explore their player-inspired tees, featuring legends like Sachin Tendulkar, Brian Lara, and Viv Richards. They also have team-inspired designs and options for hardcore cricket nerds. Their collection is a must-have for the true cricket enthusiast.
Welcome back to Overthrows. You guys are with Behram and Jared. And not a lot of international cricket this week. The USA defeated Canada in a 5-match T20I series 4-0. So I suppose leading into the World Cup, that's going to be played at home for them. That's good news. But I suppose the big one...
The Canadian in you really came out then.
Yeah, it hurt my feelings that the Canadian team lost 4-0. But anyway, Sri Lanka's women are in South Africa and they are having a full limited overs tour. And the last time we spoke on Overthrows, Sri Lanka had actually defeated South Africa 2-1 in that T20I series, and we spoke a lot about that. This time around, however, South Africa have taken an unassailable 1-0 lead in the 3-match ODI series because the first game got washed out. Yeah, and their batters have responded with heaps of runs, right? We've seen Tasman Brits scoring a ton. Marizan scored 77 in a game. And captain Laura Volvaert, she scored 100, and she now has... And credit to Hypocast for this. Even Cricinfo gave credits to Hypocast for this. She now has more 50-plus scores in lesser innings than the likes of some legends of the game, like Belinda Clark, Meg Lanning, Elise Perry. And Aman Patel, shout out to Aman Patel, one of our watchers and listeners. He mentioned to me that Laura Volvaert actually has scored more than half of Mithali Raj's international run tally. And she's 10 days away from turning 25. So based on all of that information, Jared, would you say that it's fair to claim that the Wolf is already, an established living legend of the game?
Ooh, living legend. I mean, it's weird with women's sport because you become a star so much younger. So I remember when, she was playing in the 2017 World Cup, and it was clear that she was on a different level then. I think if you were going to pick holes in her, she's probably a more conventional anchor type player. And so she doesn't win as many games as maybe some of the other players can. But yeah, I mean, if she retired now, she's probably still South Africa's best ever batter, right? Like, I mean, she's certainly in the conversation, and I don't know how old she is, but she's not old. So I think she's fantastic. I think technically, she's probably one of the more technically correct players in men's and women's cricket at the moment. But yeah, I sometimes I wonder if she has that fifth gear, which would be the only thing that would hold her back. But I mean, the stats that Hypercross was talking about, she's certainly on another level from that point of view.
Yeah, and of course, aesthetic brilliance is also something that comes with Laura Volvaert. She was Estelle's first pick in the Cover Drive's Crick Pick episode. Yeah. So, and I mean, I was not, surprised either, because I do think she has a fantastic cover drive, and she was on my list as well. And I just feel like, South Africa recently played a T20 World Cup final, and they need a big player to kind of lead them into this new era post all the retirements and everything. And, Volvaert seems like that sort of player. And yeah, I do have high expectations now, especially after reading all of those stats. So let's see how that career unfolds. Anyway, let's go to some other fun news. Nepalese power hitter Dipendra Singh Airee became the third cricketer in history of T20 international cricket to hit 6 sixes off and over. He joined an esteemed club which includes Yuvraj Singh and Kyron Pollard, and he smashed Qatar's Kamran Khan into oblivion. And Airee also took 2 wickets in that game. Now, I checked his record, Jared. 56 professional T20 innings, and he averages 39 at a strike rate of nearly 148. Now, granted that he hasn't played top-class opposition, and he probably won't even get to for the bulk of his career, but that's still a record to be proud of.
No, he's a fantastic record. I think everyone has looked up his record this week. So, yeah, he's probably not far away from getting into the sort of lower level franchise level cricket. And that's when you find out how good these players are. George Munsey a fantastic record for Scotland and got into that level and never quite kicked on. I still think Munsey has that talent. We've seen, other Irish players, obviously, Josh Little is probably another one of get to that level and then be able to kick on. So there's no reason, there's now a template for that, right? And if he's good enough, he can do that. And as someone who's hit 6 sixes in an over, one of my few really cool things about my cricket career, I'd like to welcome him to the club.
Yeah. All right then. And like Laura Wolfart, he's also just 24 years of age, and he actually has landed a contract in the GT20, I believe, and one of those Emirates leagues or whatever. But I don't think he's really.
I mean, that's where it starts, right? We saw lots of Scottish, lots of Dutch, and sort of players in that sort of level, and Namibian as well. So you see them in that level, and then hopefully he can do similar things there. He's my only memory of him as a cricketer before this is fielding. I've got this. I've got him written in a notebook somewhere. I'm positive that he's a really, really good fielder. Like, he's an incredible athlete. So if you can average 25 with a strike rate of 145, he's going to be handy in some of these leagues because of his fielding as well. And I think he bowls, doesn't he? I don't know if he's a bowler, but he bowls. I don't know what he bowls. I don't have any notes on that.
Yeah, he took 2 wickets is all I know. But with a surname like Airee, you can kind of understand how he could hit 6 sixes. Lots of air over there. Anyway, that wraps up all of our topics for overthrows this week. Time to head to our super chats, and we'll kind of move towards Uncovered after that. So let's look at these super chats. 11 of them today. Wow, good job, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Yash Palmer says DK for T20 World Cup. Well, I mean, considering a wicketkeeper might not be able to play in India's top order, you're looking at Pant or DK, right?
Yeah, I mean, you probably go Rishabh Pant, right? And DK, I still say, like, he didn't make any runs in the last World Cup, but I think that a lot of that was just dumb luck. And so I'm not massively against this. I think he's a fantastic player. I think he's very good in his role. He has to be used in that role, but you also have to accept that he might go 3 or 4 games without scoring runs because that's the position that he goes in. And he's not MS Dhoni, right? He's not that kind of player. So, look, I think that, and I'll try and get him on a podcast one day to explain it, actually. But I'd love to. I think he worked out that he was very good at a specific thing and made himself a specialist. If they think they need that role, they should look to him.
Yeah, and plus he's scooping those balls really well right now. And I mean, if Dhoni can come out of retirement somehow, then he's my pick for the T20 World Cup for India. If you guys can manage that. Anyway, Anish says lots of catches are dropped. Does that define the quality of the tournament? And I am bowling a lot of beamers. How do I stop bowling these, for God's sake? I have something to say about this. So I've been mentioning
the catches.
The catches. I have mentioned this on a fair few podcasts, and I have gotten a lot of hate and a lot of flack for it, that, you're just pointing out the negatives of the IPL. And Jared humbled you the other day when he said that, a lot more catches are, a lot of more wickets are being taken off catches. Look, you can't deny that lots of catches are being dropped. The other day, the day that guy made that comment, there were 7 dropped catches in the game. And Sunrisers, I think they dropped 5 and like 4 in the last over or something. I mean, it is the IPL. You do expect the catching to be better. I don't think it is a reflection of the quality of the tournament. I don't think that. But if you're asking me whether the catching has been good, I'm going to say no, because it hasn't, right? Like,
so today watching, I never give a shit about catches. There's a really important thing you need to know, because a catch is just another fumble, right? The most important thing is how many fumbles. There was a moment today where, and I've seen 2 games recently where I feel like you might as well hit the ball straight to the fielders, because they're going to find a way to get it behind them. Yeah. And we've seen good fielders doing it. We've seen overthrows. We haven't seen anywhere near as many runouts. Players are just running on everything, and no one seems to be getting. No bowler gets back to the stumps at the moment.
You're right.
It's not been a good fielding tournament so far. The important thing is that this happens sometimes, and then no one talks about it at the end of the tournament, because the natural cycle fixes itself, right? And that's the important thing when we're talking about this. I do think, to go back to what you said before, if more catches being offered, there are going to be more drops. That is just, sorry, did I draw a thing that if there are more catches being dropped, it's because there are more chances. So I do think those two things come hand in hand. I don't think you can make any argument that that is not the case. However, when it comes down to it, you've got to be realistic and say the fielding hasn't been up to scratch. Does that mean that the quality of the tournament is poor? No, because no one's going to remember this when people are fielding really well later on. The general athleticism and the fielding athleticism has been fine. The actual skills of fielding maybe not been as good, right?
Yeah.
But it's also worth mentioning it when it happens. Bayram would be an idiot if he wasn't talking about how many catches have been dropped, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone I know, no matter their Canadian backgrounds, have been mentioning this. So that's a stupid thing to go after someone for, because we've all seen it. I think the fielding has been shoddy so far. The how to stop beamers, your front arm stops you from bowling beamers. Are you probably not using a strong enough front arm and you want to pull down like it's a chain?
Interesting. Like Narayan? Aditya Mani Jha says, is it fair to say Cummins has improved dramatically in T20s? What changes, if any, have you observed in his method this season? I think he has definitely upped his game, because I rated him very, very highly as a test bowler. And in limited overs cricket, not at that same level. But now in this IPL, the way he's bowling, particularly kind of, carrying that attack, I think it's worth a lot of praise. And Jared can tell you what he's changed exactly.
He's been used better where he's being used, which is a really important thing for him. He's a really good middle overs bowler, because middle over players don't want to face a 90-mile-an-hour accurate bowler, right? And on top of that, he's bowling a great cutter. I've always thought he's had a very, very good cutter, occasionally a great cutter. Sometimes these things are about revolutions. He might have changed his grip to get more spinning on the ball. And the more it spins, the more it drops, the more it grips, the more it does all those sorts of things, which means it's harder to hit. He now understands how to set a field for that ball specifically, which he didn't before. Before he had the ball, but quite often didn't have the fielders in the right spot. All those things have played a part. So, yeah, I do think there's changes. It's early in the season. Teams will be ready for him to do this. And if I was facing him now, I would probably be prepared to deflect the fast balls, if possible, and just wait for the slower ball and try and hammer those. And at the moment, we haven't seen teams face him that way. If he keeps bowling the way he is, they will.
Interesting. Ashwin Suryanarayanan. I think I got that right. Rayan Parag, Abhishek Sharma and Abdul Samad finally fulfilling their potential, or is this a flash in the pan thing in freak batting season? Abhishek Sharma definitely is, and Rayan Parag has a good case as well. Shayan would say he does, because he's a big fan.
Well, Rayan Parag improved in the SMAT, so it's not just about this IPL season, right?
True.
Bayram is sick and tired of me talking about that players mature and they get better. Natural batting talent is absolutely fine. I could find you a 15-year-old on the street of Mumbai at the moment with incredible natural batting talent. Does he know what to do when Kagisa Rabada is going in at his hips? Probably not. He's not ready for that yet, right? Players develop at different rates. Rayan Parag had an incredible run, right? And I always thought Abdul Samad was a good hitter, right? Abhishek Sharma, again, it's about the ages and the maturing curve. And I think I think international cricket ruins the way we talk about cricket, and franchise cricket is going to make us think about things very differently. Because if you see a 19-year-old or a 22-year-old in international cricket, they are probably a freak, right? If they're playing for a good team, they are probably a freak. If you see it in franchise cricket, they're probably not. They're just a really, really good player who everyone thinks hopefully when they're 23, 24, is going to be a star. Right? But maybe not an international star, maybe just a franchise star, right? And so, we have to understand that these players are going to go. We have all seen, all three of those guys really, them play shots or mini innings, or sometimes even longer innings, where you think to yourself, okay, there's something there. I can see why this team's with them. Doesn't mean that, there's only so much talent, and there's a lot of teams who are going to invest in younger players for a long period of time, hoping that they will come off, rather than getting a bunch of 28, 29-year-olds who don't have a high ceiling. These are three high ceiling and probably low floor players, the way that they play. One of them could have developed at 21, and we'd say that person was a star now. And the only difference is that they learned how to develop quicker, right? And it's not an easy thing to cheat or hurry up. Players get good when they get good.
Yeah, and just on Abhishek Sharma, sorry, not Rayan Parag, I do think that for a 21-year-old, he's mad impressive, right? Like, I mean, that's crazy the way he hits the ball. So I would actually, we were talking about ceilings. I would say that he has the highest ceiling amongst those three. Just my hot take over there, or maybe not so hot.
Well, Rayan Parag is interesting to me because he's basically scoring 20 runs off 20 balls and then going nuts.
Yes.
That's a hard thing to do consistently in the middle order. Now, if he can't bat in the top order, that's going to be really, really interesting going ahead because he's going to play a lot of innings where he comes in the seventh over, gets 20 off 20 and then gets out. And his team will be in a terrible position. That's the worst innings you can play in that middle order, right? Is that 20 off 20. So, like, at least if you've done it with a new ball, you've survived the new ball so that your team hasn't lost a bunch of wickets early on. Whereas if you did that as a number 4, it means your team's now lost at least 3 wickets and you've just scored 20 off 20. So I think that's an interesting one worth looking at.
Yeah, the other day as well, he got like 50 off 34 and then ended with 70 something off 48. So
yeah, his catch-up skills are not a problem at all.
Yeah. Catch-up skills are quite impressive. Anyway, Lenny Rodriguez says, really impressed with Cummins' improvement in white ball format. What are your honest opinions on his captaincy skills, both for Australia and Sunrisers? And did you expect him to do this well when he was announced as captain for Australia? I think his leadership skills are great. I think he's a great rallier of men, and like just the way he's led this Australian side and brought diversity into it. And, he's not put a foot wrong when it comes to PR. He's literally been the dream captain in that regard. And he got shit for being woke and stuff. And he's having his moment under the sun now. Tactically, I feel like he is defensive, but that's good in a way because his shrewd skills, they come in handy for Australia and they win them games and tournaments and trophies. So, yeah, I'm impressed.
Yeah, I don't think he's an outstanding tactical captain in any way, shape, or form. I think a lot of people will remember the World Cup final and be like, oh, and it's like, yeah, well, we've also watched him play a lot of cricket where he hasn't done anything at all. And that's quite common for bowling captains. They think, we'll just keep the pressure on, we'll put the ball in the right area, whereas batting captains are like, let's bowl Yorker, let's try a part-timer. And bowling captains are like, why would I do that? So that's a natural thing. He is a leader and he has brought most of the teams he plays together. He's also very diligent. Like he doesn't have an MS Dhoni or an Owen Morgan style brain, right? And that's fine, but he's diligent. He does the work and he tries to learn as much as he can. And I think he's a very intelligent person just in general. But I don't think, if you're looking for a great tactical innovation, it's rare that is going to come from Pat Cummins. But if you've got a team that is good and he can organize the deck chairs correctly, I think he's very good at that sort of stuff because he'll be like, okay, well, you do this and you do this. And I think he likes role definition from that kind of point of view, which means, sometimes those great tactical captains are very hard to play for because on a ball-by-ball basis, you're not quite sure what they're going to ask you to do. And when you have a captain that is very predictable, you know your role, you know his mood, and you know how things are going to be. So for some players, that can work better.
Yeah, Cummins retained the Ashes in England by keeping all of the fielders at the boundary rope and just waiting for England to hit. So,
yeah,
in a way, smart, right? Anyway, Sarah Maish Bhale Gill, let's just skip this one. No point
I wasn't sure.
This question. Yeah. Because it's clearly a jibe. V exclamation mark says, do you think the smart stats actually underplay how bad the bowling has been today? I feel like raw figures do a better job of summing up today. Damn, he's challenging you, Jared.
Oh, I don't do smart stats. Isn't that a crick info thing? I don't know. I don't actually know what.
I thought he was talking about true stats.
Yeah. So I don't know. We don't use true stats on a game-to-game basis very much. We use them overall. I think. So I can't give you a good, and also Crickinfo's one is different than some of the others, certainly than the ones I was involved when they were setting it up, and I didn't agree with all of it. One of the things that they did was they compared players from in the same game. So like Aiden Markram would be a massive negative today because Heinrich Klaassen was hitting sixes at the other end, but that's not. He might have had the better matchups at that stage, or he might have had the there's multiple levels to all that sort of stuff. So I don't know all that much about smart stats, but I wasn't over on Cricket Info having a look at them. Me and Varun were putting together a video at the last moment, which will probably be up by the time we finish this podcast, if we're being honest.
Yeah, let's see. And you guys should go check that out. Anyway, Anish says, why are people getting mad with the high scoring games? Does this have to do with not quality bowling or flat as fuck pitches? Is it good for the game? We've had 3 games in which we've had extremely high scores, right? There was Sunrisers versus Mumbai. There was this game today, Sunrisers versus RCB. And there was that game in which I think Mumbai scored 230 odd, was it?
I feel that is 3. I can't remember what the third one is, but I think you're right.
There was also Sunrisers versus Kolkata, in which Sunrisers nearly chased down that Kolkata score, but that was more 200-ish score, so I won't count that. If we're talking about 230-plus games, I think there have been 3. That's not a lot. I mean, if we see them infrequently, it's fun. I find them fun. If you see them every game, it's a problem.
I remember having a look at the distribution of games in the 2015 World Cup, and there was a lot of really big scoring games and a lot of very low scoring games. That's kind of what you want, right? You want games, some games that are high scoring and some games that are low scoring, and it's the variability and the unpredictability of those sorts of things that I think make sport more entertaining. If every game is just going to be, 500 runs plays 500 runs in any format, well, T20, that would be quite remarkable, but it can get a little bit boring. I think there were parts of that game today, if you're a cricket fan, you might just be like, what's the point? Because there was only one side out on whoever was batting was just going to hit sixes almost every single ball they faced. And I can see why that is one-dimensional. Not everyone will like it. Casual fans generally like higher scoring games. Proper cricket fans generally like lower scoring games in my knowledge. And lower scoring games usually mean that there's more chance of the games being close, because the more you score, the bigger the gap is between the two sides. So low scoring games quite often be more entertaining because they come down to the end. That's why you need everything. I've got no problem with them. There should be a natural evolution of cricket. And there is, and teams are scoring quicker, and batters are understanding why, and they're changing the way they're playing. And bowlers are. I have been on the record for about 6 years saying that I thought bowlers were doing better than batters in T20 cricket, because I thought batters should have gone through the roof, and they weren't. Now we're seeing them go through the roof. I can't sit here and complain that the batters have finally worked out how to do that. But you need low-scoring games as well, and you need middle-scoring games. And I think we've had quite a few of all of them so far. But it is a high-scoring tournament as it currently stands. Yeah. And so that that does warp things a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I love myself a low-scoring thriller. I mean, I am from Pakistan. That's what we kind of grew up on. But yeah, I don't mind this every once in a while. There was this PSL, I think it was last year's PSL, in which every Rawalpindi game was a high-scoring game. Yeah. That got really boring. I completely agree that you would have had
other pitches that wouldn't have done that, right?
Yeah, but then you had all of these Pindi games in a row, right? So every day
that was the big thing with that tournament, wasn't it? There was a bunch in a row. And look, I think one-dimensional with anything, is really, really boring. Like when everyone is shooting in football only when they get within 5 inches of the goal, you're just like, oh, well, that's a bit boring. When everyone in the NFL is not running and they're all throwing passes at the same time, it's a little bit boring. It's the variability of these sports that is part of the magic. And that's up to the legislators to be able to help. But I don't think, watching this tournament, I have felt like there have been some lower scores. So if every game was like, if the par score was 200 at the moment, I'd be more on side. It's still, it's about 184, I think, at the moment, like right? Which is high. It's really high. We're a long way away from multiple consistent games of being over 250. So I'm not too worried.
Yeah, and we did have like 160 odd being defended by Gujarat in this tournament as well. So I think it kind of evens out. Ankit D says, how good is Bilal Khan from Oman? Is he IPL level quality? I haven't seen Bilal Khan from Oman.
He's a really good bowler. I don't think he's IPL level quality unless you had an injury and you kind of at the last minute were looking for. My memory is that he has a ridiculous new ball record. I won't be able to pick him up now. But yeah, my memory is that he has a ridiculous record with the new ball, and so with that and his left arm, but he's like. He's also very, very old. other leagues. This is the thing about the IPL thing. It's like a lot of these players, they just get picked out of nowhere. Why are the IPL teams not trying them in other leagues to see where they are, or trialing them more? I'd be surprised if Bilal Khan hasn't had a trial with a franchise somewhere. And he's certainly, I think, a very talented player. He's probably not quite IPL level, but I don't think he's like masses off franchise level from what I've seen of him.
I've just checked, and he has played in the BPL. So I mean, hopefully.
Oh, okay, but there you go. I mean, I think that's fair. I've seen him dominate at associate level sometimes. He's a brilliant bowler.
All right, Anish says batting quality gone up or bowling quality gone down. I think we kind of answered this, but you can take it.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it before. How about if I said this, Anish? Neither of those things have happened. What has happened is that batters have unlocked something that they haven't got better, right? What they have got is got more efficient at the way that they play and understand their game more. And for a long period of time, the bowlers were a half a step in front of them, and that's just slipped back a little bit. And have a look at the way England play Test cricket. Have a look at the way England played ODI cricket. There is plenty of proof out there that the batters were actually underperforming. 20 years ago, you were supposed to knock the ball around at about 4.5 runs and over for 30 overs in an ODI game. Why did we let Mahela Jayawardene and some of these some of these other players do that when they can smack it, right? When they can score a lot quicker? They are fantastic levels of talented players who are just knocking the ball off their hip for one over and over again. Batters have worked out now that they can take risks and continue and without losing their wicket and up the scoring rate. And it's now up to bowlers to try and catch up again.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Last super chat of overthrows. Path right winger says he's KKA tragic. And KKR tragic, sorry. I don't know what I said. I think the top three.
Did you say KKK?
I think I said KKA, but I thought KKK, and all of a sudden I was like, whoa, Behram. Anyway, Path right winger is a KKR tragic, and he says I think the top three are on some sort of dream run. The Airee are not going to fire. Stark has had one good game. Do you think they're doing way better than they should? Jared does. Jared thinks they're overperforming a lot.
Yeah, maybe not a lot. Because they bowled well the other day, so I'll give them, that was the one thing I was waiting for, right? But yes, I do think that they've overperformed a little bit at the moment. Like, well, the best way of looking at that is that Sunil Narine is making tons of runs, and do I think he's going to do that consistently all the way through the season? No. Phil Salt has made some runs, but I think he's looked really, really messy at times, and with bat and gloves. And Chakravarti and Mitchell Stark I still have questions with. So I think if I remember, and I haven't looked at it, but when the last game happened on Sunday, I think Rajasthan were 460 and Chennai were 460 and Mumbai were 5s to win the championship on most, the sort of collective bookies knowledge. And I thought that was very short on Kolkata from what I'd seen of them. But having said that, that doesn't mean I don't think they're the third best team. Right, because I think they probably have shown to be the third best team at the moment. But I've got a lot of questions with them, and I want to see a lot more before I'm comfortable.
Yeah, and Path, I think you might have missed the KKR review earlier. I think what I know what I said, and that was that if they can continue to have good bowling games like the one that they just had, then I think that they're contenders. Anyway, final super chat, Akshu Dhavala, who is a Tottenham Hotspur fan. Come on, Akshu, do better. He says, "Hey, Jared and Behram, always enjoy the pods. Thank you. Do you think the security?" For his football team. I mean, that's just friendly banter. He knows that. I hope he does. He says, "Do you think the security of depth of the impact player rule brings batters or allows batters to be more aggressive in the middle rather than just consolidate?" Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point, right? You kind of throw the kitchen sink at it because you've got more depth now.
Yeah, so we just did that video I was talking about before. So it's going to be called How to Almost Score 300 Runs in an IPL Match. And it should be up within a couple of hours. Apologies if Shubu's watching this going, Jared, stop mentioning it. I'm trying my hardest. But in it, I talk about the fact that the runs haven't gone up that much in major T20 cricket in the 5 main leagues. but there has been a kick in the IPL since the impact sub. I think the bouncer rule also, because the thing with the bouncer is you're looking for a wicket and you go for runs. But I also think the big difference is now that teams believe you have to dismiss players to be able to keep them down to low scores. And in order to do that, you bowl a little bit more aggressive, and it goes both ways. So we will see some teams get bowled out cheaply, and we will see some other teams go more expensive. And we saw that during the World Cup. That one of the big things that Australia changed is at the start of that tournament, Australia was bowling to contain. And at the end of that tournament, Australia was bowling to take wickets. And that is how white ball cricket is now played, because these guys are too good at scoring at a higher rate consistently that you can't just let them do what they want, right? Unless you get, India in the World Cup semi-final against England, or Pakistan occasionally, the vast majority of teams now will push themselves, and you give them an impact sub, right? And they've got bonus hitting to come later on. So most teams now can bat to number 8, right? That's not a normal thing in franchise cricket. Normal thing in franchise cricket is you're lucky if you can bat to 7. Most teams at the moment are batting to 8, and there's a couple of other teams that can go even deeper than that. That just gives you such a cushion.
Also, we've got 2 super chats while you were answering that one. Anish has sent one, and then Path Right Winger says he has another one up over there. Anish says, if Sunrisers win the IPL, will you guys be surprised? We're going to go into hiding.
Yeah, why are Sunrisers fans upset? I don't know what we've said that's upset them. Have I missed something?
KKR fans and Sunrisers fans have been upset with me this IPL. That's what I've noticed.
Okay. I mean, I don't mind if they're upset with you. Why would they be upset with me? I'm a lovely person. I mean, to be honest, you need the most honest thing with me is anyone who's ever followed any of the stuff. The shirt doesn't mean a thing to me. The city doesn't mean a thing. It's really, I'm looking for strengths and weaknesses and everything else. And KKR and Sunrisers might both go. I think they're most likely to end up 4th and 5th, or 3rd and 4th. I should say, and the other 2 teams I think are better. That doesn't mean that they are. I think they would be they were my top 4 in my power list. So if you're angry that I've got you in the top 4, how angry would you be if you were not in the top 4? Like, what are we talking about here? It's just I think the other teams are better.
Let me just say this, Anish, and it's been overused, this phrase, throughout millennia. Batters win you games, bowlers win you tournaments, right?
Cool.
And those are 2 batting heavy teams. So
yeah,
that's
also very true. Agree.
Yeah. Path Right Winger says Jared he's saying Jared said Pooran, Dre, Russ, and Klaasen are the best batters. That means they are better at their job than Joss Butler and Sky. Shouldn't the best batsman bat at the top?
Okay.
Well,
so the issue with this is that if you put Dre Russ at the top, he doesn't want to bat in the power play because he will nick off a lot. So let's say he can average 30 at number 6. Are you willing to have him potentially average 18 or 20 if he bats up the order? If Dre Russ wanted to bat up the order, do you think KKR would not put him up there? Pooran, again, doesn't love going in early. And the issue with Pooran going in early is he becomes more of an anchor. Just naturally, it's the way he goes about it. Do you not want to unleash him when he's at his absolute best and he can do something that no one else can do? And who's the other guy who's got? Klaasen. Klaasen's the world's best player of spin. Why do you want him in the power play facing seam? Right? Why do you? The worst case scenario you could have for Heinrich Klaasen is that he nicks off in the 5th over against the seamer. Actually, the 3rd over. I'll go further against the seamer. So when you have players like that, you don't necessarily always have the ability to push them up. There are some players, I think Hetmeyer is one, and he's been very clear with this. He wants to go up the order. I thought Corin Pollard was a player who probably should have batted up the order, certainly on days when there wasn't great wrist spin being bowled. So there are other players I think have batted too low, but you have to look at what their strengths are and how they work it out, and also what they feel comfortable with, right? There's no point sending one up to the top if they don't feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, Path, you basically have to look at the phases and how well those batters perform in those particular phases and, utilize them optimally as per their strengths and weaknesses, right? So if I have a solid spin basher, I want that spin basher to have an entry point in the middle overs. Whereas if I have someone who is great against pace, they either come in the power play or they hit out at the death. So, I mean, that's the sort of skill sets that you need to look out for, I suppose. But anyway, after 10 billion super chats, we're finally done
Don't
with this
complain when we have
episode.
lots of super chats.
Yeah, of course not.
We love
get
each
more
and every
money.
one of you.
Yes, and thank you all for your generous contributions to Good Areas. And of course, a reminder that for all of our written content, videos, and podcasts, you can go to goodareas.co. And thank you all for being in the comments. And if you like this video, like it on YouTube, share it with your friends, and subscribe to both this channel and Jared's other channel on YouTube. We'll be back with another episode of Overthrows next week. That's all for now. Goodbye. And for all of our YouTube listeners and watchers, stay with us because after this short break, we'll be back with Uncovered.
Support us on Patreon and help us keep making our content. Join for exclusive perks like the AMAs, the live calls, and to chat with me directly on Discord. You can also enjoy ad-free content, early podcasts, and access to my emailer. Step up your cricket-style game with Bodyline t-shirts. Explore their exclusive player-themed t-shirts, including favourites like Virat Kohli, Kane Williamson, and Ben Stokes. They also have team-inspired designs and options for hardcore cricket nerds. Their collection offers something unique for every fan.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 80 of the Uncovered podcast. I'm Behram Kazi, who you can find at Def Mango, and with me is Jared Kimber, as always, who you can find absolutely everywhere. And we've actually got or ended up with a fair few off-the-field cricket news topics. And I remember yesterday I was like, nothing happened this week. We don't have anything to talk about. And here we are with 5 things to talk about. We'll start off, Jared, with Pakistan's new coaching ensemble. Are you ready for this?
I mean, never.
I'm giving you a trigger warning. But anyway, Azhar Mahmood has assumed the role of head coach for the New Zealand T20I series. It's a stopgap solution. He's probably an interim coach. And, someone who has worked as bowling coach of this team in the past and was their bowling coach when Pakistan won the 2017 Champions Trophy. He also won the PSL recently with Islamabad United. He was assistant coach over there. And he's, working with Surrey, champions in England, and the Oval Invincibles who won the 100. So he's had a lot of success in the recent past. Azhar could be slotted in as the bowling coach, in the future as well. Once, I suppose, Gary Kirsten assumes his role, and that's the rumor. That's what the rumor mill says. But not the worst appointment, I'd say, this one.
It's an interesting one because Surrey is one of the most prestigious and well-paid positions in cricket, but Alex Stewart is stepping down, and obviously him and Azhar Mahmood probably have a relationship going back a long time. So I wonder if it's as simple as that, where he just went, they might move in a new direction, and I'm being offered this really good spot. But we all know that it is, if you're being offered a Pakistani coaching job, then you really need to worry about what you're going to do in 4 months' time to find a new job. So
yeah,
there is that. I was a bit shocked, I think, based on that. But I obviously live close to the Oval. I know Gareth Batty and, know a lot of the Oval guys. They all talk really highly of him, especially when it comes to his skills coaching sort of thing. So I think it'd be really, really interesting. His wife is quite prominent on social media at times. I wonder if she might need to gear down as just because it's tough. It's I'm not saying she's wrong to use social media the way she does, but she's about to enter a different world of social media, is my guess. So good luck to her as well. Good luck to the whole family.
Yeah. And I mean, I like Azhar. I think he's a student of the game and he's had success with Pakistan in the past. So maybe, she's had some experiences that she can, go back to. And I don't see that being as much of an issue, but I do fear that, they're just going to discard Azhar maybe once they sign Gary Kirsten, who, by the way, Mohammad Yusuf, who is both a selector and the batting coach of this team now. So the batters are going to be shitting bricks in the nets because if they don't play well, he might not select them. It's a very unhealthy environment, or not a nurturing environment, at least. Yeah. It's definitely not. And they've done this once with Misbah when he was made everything. Misbah was the be-all and end-all of Pakistan cricket.
That went great, though, and they started winning lots. No, it didn't go great.
No, it did not. And I mean, I was always against that as well. I just don't know why Yusuf, who was just with the under-19s team and had his stint as batting coach with Pakistan and was now a selector, felt the need to come in as batting coach, because you're going to make those batters tense, especially the new guys in the team, because they're not going to play freely in the nets, let alone a game, because they'll fear for their spot. And it's just not the right way to do things, in my opinion.
No, I mean, you've nailed that. I've got nothing to add there.
He did have a Freudian slip where he said that, hey, Gary Kirsten is our head coach, and there's been no news of such sort. So I don't know if he got the memo from the PCB or not, but now it will be extremely embarrassing for the PCB if Gary rejects the job, which is obviously on the cards always with the Pakistan Cricket Board, because who would want to take that job, which has the worst job security in the world? Do you remember how a couple of shows, or maybe last Uncovered, I mentioned Pakistan's new data analyst, a friend of the chairman, is a politician who's worked in forestry and fisheries. Remember that?
Yeah, of course.
So
I'm never going to forget that fact.
This guy came to a presser and he said that, hey, I'm an engineer by degree, and lots of data analysts are, and I have worked with data in strategy and finance. My entire career has revolved around data, so I am fit for this job. And when I read that, I wanted to bang my head against a concrete wall, because if we wanted a finance guy, we'd go to Goldman Sachs, we'd go to Wall Street. You have no cricket data analysis experience. Like, I have data experience as well. I've worked in corporate. I have an engineering degree. I'm not fit for the role. I even work with you guys, right, at good areas. I understand true strike rates and true economy. Yet, I don't think I'm fit for the role. How does this dude, bro, think that he's going to, fit right in?
Why is he giving a press conference if he's a team's analyst?
Why is he?
That's my first thought. Right? I know that's probably not where you wanted me to go. My first thought was, what? Why is he doing that? So I don't understand the press conference. From what I've just heard of what he said there, that means there are 200,000 people in the world qualified to be the analyst of the Pakistani cricket team.
Basically.
Right? So that doesn't make any sense at all. It's probably going to end really, really poorly. Being an analyst of a cricket team is a really, really tricky position. It requires a knowledge of how cricketers and coaches think. It requires a knowledge of how data works.
And how to look at data, right? Like, it requires a specific lens. You can't just look at raw data and strike rates and averages and just, figure stuff out over there. You have to look
can
at
have a
faces and
person like that in your team, but that doesn't mean anything, because all you're looking at there, if you, the analysts who get ignored the most are the ones who go, look at this is an outlier, you should do something about this. And it seems like, well, okay, what are we supposed to do with that? You need the ability to communicate, to bring it across. You need to understand their language. And I don't mean Urdu or English or, or something like that. I mean legitimately cricket language. You need to understand their educational points and where they come from and how they've never sat down and looked at any of this stuff before. You need to understand why there is an outlier on your screen. You need to interrogate all of that, right? And you need to probably put your head down and do the work. And it sounds like I just don't understand why he's doing a press conference.
Yeah.
Now, maybe they just thought that there was so much bad press he had to do it. But can you tell me another data analyst in world cricket who's ever done a press conference? I've never done a press conference, and I'm fucking more famous than him.
Yeah.
Right? Nathan Lehman, I can't think of Nathan. I can't.
Yeah.
Prasanna, Nathan Lehman, Freddie Wild. Those are the three probably most famous analysts, unless I'm forgetting anyone else.
Ben Jones.
Yeah, Ben. I mean, Ben less so than those guys. I mean, they've done international cricket, but yeah, Ben. I can't think of any of those people who've done a press conference. Talking to the press is different. Right? If it's talking to the press and someone requests to interview, I've interviewed Nathan and others before. But if it's a press conference, I don't know. It just seems the whole thing, their whole vibe is off.
Yeah. I mean, you were already receiving a lot of flack from, all corners, because no one was buying this. Everyone looked at your Twitter and you were just retweeting the chairman even before he was chairman. So you're clearly his guy. Why would you come to a press conference and make this worse for you? And you can't convince us by saying that you worked in strategy and finance that you're fit for the role. Like, this is just, that alone makes me convinced that he's not fit for the role.
And I know there are people that have worked in doing analysis right across different sports that have backgrounds like that, right? Muhammad Khan is a perfect example of someone who came in and has worked in cricket as a professional and brings a lot of, a similar business background and everything else. But he's also completely steeped in the game, right? And he looks at things from a different perspective. Just saying that you have an engineering degree or whatever it may be, it's like, well, that's not what this is. It is far beyond that. And look, I don't know. Good luck to him. I hope he does really well. I mean, I do. I don't want people to fail, but it's just the whole thing just seems nuts to me.
Yeah, it does. It is very bizarre. And I mean, it is a specialized role. It deserves that respect at this point. Like, we're in 2024. This is not 2001. So that's what pisses me off. And I'm sure it does the same for a lot of other Pakistanis. Saeed Ajmal is the spin bowling coach. Fine. Not too perturbed with that. Science is the man. All of that good stuff. And Wahab Riaz, who Jared... you remember those good old days when I wrote a piece after he retired, and then you wrote a piece on when he retired? That was a long time ago. A lot has happened since then. He has worn multiple hats since retiring from cricket. He was first made the caretaker sports minister of Punjab, which is a province. And then whilst he had that job, he was made chief selector of the PCB. So those are two big jobs that he was doing in tandem. And now he's not a selector or not the chief selector anymore. He's just a regular selector, but also the senior team manager in this team. And he claims that this is not the first time selectors have traveled with the team. Well, Wahab, if you go and watch a game, that's different. If you're in the dressing room, that's weird, right? And also, the other selectors that I can think of are Misbah and maybe Inzi. So you're just talking about Pakistanis at this point. Maybe a New Zealander here and there. I'm not
Bailey?
sure. Maybe Bailey. And I
I mean,
think
traditionally, when you went on the road, the captain, vice captain, sometimes a senior member were the selection committee, and obviously coaches have been. I think George Bailey has changed things quite dramatically because he is the general manager of Australian cricket. Really, even if he's called chief selector, they should change his title and make him work properly. Bales probably doesn't want to do that, but that is what they should do with him. And he does throwdowns, and he is involved. The difference is that I think there's a level of professionalism, and I'm a little bit biased because we're friends, right? So take that, but I've watched him from a distance with the Australian team. He's doing the right things, and he's trying to get it in the right position. This feels like these guys just want gigs, and they want multiple gigs, and they want power, and that's the issue that we have. And the fact that every week we find out they've got a new position or a new job, right, tells you that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Like, I mean, it could not be any more clear that they don't know what they're doing. The way this has been drip fed, the chairman's nonsense, this data analyst stuff, this I'm the captain, I'm the coach. The captain said this. Now I'm the coach. Now I'm the selector. Now I'm the chairman's selectors. Now I'm not actually. Now I'm the team manager. Now I'm two different roles at once. It's quite clear that they're making this up as they go along. So that is very different from George Bailey going, I want to be chairman of selectors, but this is how I want to do it. This is how I think the job should be done. And I'm going to present to Cricket Australia and say, this is how I want the system to go. And this is how I think you guys were failing before. And this is how I think Pat Howard's role wasn't perfect. And the chairman and selectors roles beforehand weren't perfect. That's Rob Key did a similar thing. Andrew Strauss did a similar thing. You know, we've seen this, in New Zealand as well. What Pakistan is doing is giving people fancy titles and then giving them double fancy titles and then just going, we'll see how it all goes.
Yeah, he said that he's going to be looking after the workloads of the fast bowlers and rotation. I mean, is that what a senior manager does, though?
No.
That's not what
I don't really know what a senior manager is. I'm not sure I've ever heard of that role in cricket. Which I'm okay with. Teams, sports make up new roles all the time. I'm okay with that. But it just feels like they gave him another role so they could either give him more money or give him more power. And it's like, okay, again, that's the wrong way to do this.
I mean, there is a regular team manager. Is he his boss? And also just the fact that I know how Pakistani culture works, and there's a lot of strong arming and there's a lot of muscle flexing that, oh, look, I have the power, I have the authority. That's what I fear over here. Plus, like, Wahab Riaz loves to wear all of these hats, but only wore one jacket.
Hey, I like that.
Anyway, let's move on. Enough on Pakistan. Let's move to Australia now. Mitch Marsh has torn his hamstring. It is a minor tear from what we hear. It's not
Is it
too
a
serious.
tear? Because Cricket Australia said it was a strain.
Oh, did they? Because I read tear.
Because if it's a tear, he's out of the World Cup. And I thought he was not out of the World Cup.
He's not. He's gone back to Australia for rehab. And I mean, they are going to wrap him up in cotton wool because this is the guy who Cricket Australia had earmarked as the person who will assume captaincy duties in this T20 World Cup.
Yeah.
And he's also a key batter, right? If you go back to the triumphant campaign of 2021, Mitch Marsh at first drop was one of the key ingredients of that World Cup win. So losing him would be massive and it would be a major blow to Australia. And yeah, I mean, if it is just a strain, then we don't have much to worry about. But if it is a tear, then this is bad.
If it's a tear, he's out of the World Cup, I would say. I'm just cricket.com.au is, it's not an independent news source, but it is Cricket Australia. I would assume they would know, and they would, because I could see a lot of other people are writing. I'm just going through the Google now. A lot of people have written hamstring injury. But a lot of people in Australia have written hamstring strain. I have seen people write tear as well. You're right. But I think that might be people who don't know the difference.
Fair enough.
If it's a hamstring tear, I could not see how he could play in that World Cup. And he certainly won't be able to bowl or move in the field all that well. If it's a strain, then it makes sense for him to come back, get it ready for the World Cup. And he might still not be 100% as the tournament begins, but it shouldn't be a massive issue for him. But it's also not what you want when you've just decided to, essentially hand over the team to him. And he's always been, he's a big dude. Like he does get, a lot of soft tissue injuries. He was an Aussie rules footballer as well. And if I'm not mistaken, he had hamstring issues back then as well. So it's probably something he's always had. I can kind of see how that might be a thing for him. But yeah. I wouldn't worry yet because I think if he was out of the World Cup, we would know.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, they manage this correctly, and I think he probably shouldn't play the remainder of the IPL. It just doesn't make sense. Because
No, I don't. To be honest, I'm not sure if you'd be able to anyway. But where Delhi currently are, I think it makes more sense for everyone not to do that. And the thing with a strain is they can hang around. I don't know if a strain becomes a tear, but it could be much worse of a strain at the very least, right? And so, if it's not right, it's not right. Get some treatment at home and hopefully you're ready by the start of the World Cup. Might be different if, he was in one of the top 4 or 5 teams. And then you'd say, look, go home, get your treatment. But is it okay if we make the finals for you to whip back over? At the moment, that doesn't look like it's going to be an issue with Delhi.
Yeah, and Punter won't risk Mitch Marsh because he is an Australian at heart and he'd want Australia to win that World Cup. He makes no mistake of mentioning his Australianness, which, I mean, I'm fine with. Anyway, there is more IPL off the field news, but we'll take a short break at this point. You guys are watching Uncovered with Behram and Jared, and we'll be back after this ad.
If you watch this channel, you'll love us on Main, where we do deep dives into the greatest cricket stories every week at Good Areas. How did Virat Kohli play that shot? What is so weird about Neil Wagner? And explaining the incredible misery of being a New Zealand opening batter. Visit our Good Areas site today. Want to show the world that you not only love cricket, but that you know the game deeply? Well, you need a Bodyline t-shirt. In fact, at Bodyline t-shirts, you can actually buy a t-shirt about Bodyline, but also tees inspired by the greatest players in our game. Head to Bodyline t-shirts today.
Welcome back to the Uncovered podcast. You guys are with Behram and Jared. And next up, we've got a pretty heartwarming story. That of Vijayakanth Viyaskanth. I think I've got that pronunciation right. He's gotten his big break in the IPL. He's been snapped up by the Sunrisers Hyderabad as their Hasaranga replacement. And Vijayakanth is also a right-arm leg break bowler, much like Hasaranga. And according to Estelle, he's one of the few real products of the LPL, where he actually did play alongside Hasaranga in 2 title-winning seasons for Jaffna. He's also born and raised in Jaffna, and he is the first ever professional cricketer to hail from the region. And that's a region which has been ravaged by civil war in the not so distant past. So a call up to the national team might still be a fair distance away, but this is still huge for a 22-year-old who, by the way, has already featured for Emirates. So it's not like he's completely new to the franchise T20 circuit.
No, look, it's great news. the so I wrote a piece about a netballer, Targini, who's a 6'11" netballer from Jaffna and that area, and she was saying to me that how athletic people were in that area, and I think Estelle might have told me this before, or Fernando, or maybe it was even one of my wife's family members once, said a similar thing as well, which is, that there is a ridiculous amount of sporting talent there, and it hasn't come out, right? And you know how I feel. I hate talent being wasted. I hate people not getting opportunities that could change their lives. And look, this is a really exciting one. Who knows if he'll get a game, because they're kind of working now. We were desperate for them to have Hasaranga, but partly that was for his little bit of batting as well.
Yes.
This is a slightly different kind of situation, but it's great for them to have a leg spinner on the bench. Maybe they have him as the super sub in some games, and when they can bring him in. People keep getting upset because I say super sub, not impact sub. It's like it was super sub for like ages, and it's just become impact sub, and we don't even call it impact sub in all the different leagues that try it. But yeah, they can put him on the bench and whip him in for a particular game if they need to, or a good matchup, or whatever that may be. I know nothing more about him than what I think I saw, because I think I've seen a couple of Jaffna games, so I think I've seen him bowl. Didn't see him bowl for the Emirates, but I do think I've seen him bowl a little bit, and from what I remember, he looks sound. But yeah, if he plays 2 or 3 games, just to give him a go, I think that's a good way to ease him in. As we've been talking about, there's a lot of young players or inexperienced players being thrown into this IPL. At least he has played in a franchise league and, has had some success at home. So hopefully that works for them if they need another spinner.
Yeah, he was leading the attack for Jaffna when Hasaranga got injured. So that's something to note. And, to your earlier point where you said that there are a lot of, athletic people from that region. When I was talking to Estelle about this, she said that cricket in Sri Lanka is centralized in the Western province. So the talented players from the north and the east, they had no freedom to get to the cricket center. And I mean, the rebel governed areas had a part to play in that as well. But basically, so many talented players from that region just could never pursue cricket professionally. So in that regard, I think this is a great stepping stone, and we get to see even more players from Jaffna.
I don't think Sri Lanka's got anywhere near to tapping into the talent on that island. The whole East Coast is almost never mentioned at all. South has probably got, over the last few years, since the freeway came into Colombo, it's probably changed a little bit. It's still not particularly easy to get between Kandy and Colombo. And Kandy's Kandy's like a big village. Like it's, especially Colombo's a proper major international city. And Kandy's a bit like a big village in the mountains. And that's before you get to the north and some of the other regional spots. So I do think there is a talent issue, identification issue, and there is that whole idea that you have to move to the right areas to be successful. If you've only got 20 or 25 million people, you kind of need to work that out. And that's why franchise leagues are so important, because franchise leagues actually go out looking for the talent in a way that domestic cricket doesn't have to, because domestic cricket's role doesn't really matter if your local domestic team wins or loses, right? Whereas a franchise team has a lot of external pressures on them. And so these things really, really matter. And we've seen it right across the cricket world, of these sorts of things. So this is a great story,
Yeah, an absolute trailblazing story, and we wish Vijayakanth all the success. Also, recently, Andrew Fidel Fernando, he posted a tweet in which he said that, Mathisa Patharana, who he also thinks is the fastest bowler Sri Lanka ever produced, he hails from, the Sinhalese part of central Sri Lanka, and he is playing for Chennai and lighting up, the stadiums in Tamil Nadu, which is the state which Chennai belongs in. So sport cannot, mend the wounds of yesteryear, but they can give you good stories like that, and they can kind of provide some healing in the form of bringing people together. And I think that's a big takeaway over here.
No, definitely. There's no doubt of that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right, last bit of IPL news, which is Hardik Pandya's woes. And I'm not talking about his captaincy decisions. We already spoke about that on overthrows. I'm talking about the body language. Now, obviously, we know that he was booed incessantly at Ahmedabad, the Narendra Modi Stadium. And when I say booed, I actually mean abused. Because booing is fine. I feel like booing is the right of every fan. But when you swear at a player en masse, that is, I feel, is problematic. And I don't think he's been sworn at the 1K day, but he has been booed quite consistently. It has become a bit of a theme. People have picked up on it. And I was really intrigued by what KP had to say about it, because he said that
Which
when he
KP?
looks at Kevin Peterson.
Only reason I say that is because Karen Pollard also talked about him
Yeah.
this week.
Oh, I'll listen to you then what he had to say. But what KP said was that he can look at Hardik Pandya and just judging by his body language, he knows he's not in a good mental space. Because even I've noticed this. KP brought up how he's always smiling or overly smiling in all of the media interactions, which is kind of feels like not normal. And, when I look at him in the dugout, he seems a bit tense. And I think it's getting to him. And KP said that he was someone who was in the firing line a lot. Kevin Peterson, of course, we all know that. And it, impacted him as well. And of course, it would at some level. But do you think that this is the primary reason why Hardik Pandya is failing grandly at Mumbai in the second stint?
Which bit? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Like both as captain and as player?
But what are you saying? Because he's got bad body language, he's failing?
No, because he's getting all of this criticism and jeers from the crowd.
He was failing before.
So that's...
Yeah.
So KP is wrong.
I came in and he bowled the first over, and I think he was trying to make a statement already. Since then, he's barely bowled. And when he did bowl in the last game, he shouldn't have bowled. Yeah. He's not seeing the ball particularly well when he bats, and he's been very frantic with his captaincy. Some good and some bad, some terrible as well. I just don't think he's confident. I don't think he's comfortable in his own body at the moment. I don't think he's playing the way he wants to play. And then you get booed, and you get flack. It was a weird situation to come into because Rohit is Mr. Mumbai, and he was sort of parachuted back in. I know he is a Mumbai player himself, but yeah, so I think that's all an issue. But no, I think if he was playing good, I don't think if he was playing good to begin with, the booing would never have happened. And if he wasn't being booed, I still think he would be having trouble with his form because he doesn't look quite right to me.
Yeah, I don't think he's fully fit, especially, judging by his bowling. Because, when Hardik Pandya is at full tilt, he's a very good bowler.
He looked like you bowling the other day, and I've never even seen you bowl.
You could say that. But just on the smiling too much bit, because that's what KP pointed out. And I also kind of noticed that whenever I see Hardik Pandya talking to the media, he's just too happy. It's a wide smile. I feel like that does have something to do with the booing and the jeering. I mean, he's kind of maybe trying to show that it's not impacting him.
I don't want to have a go at you and KP, but I mean, what are we doing here? We're talking about how much he smiles at press conferences. He's bowling like shit and he's batting like shit, and he hasn't worked out a way to captain a team that was really happy with its previous captaincy. Sometimes, I mean, every sports fan in the world and every sports media person in the world has talked about body language. How about fucking not bowling shit and making some runs? Right? And getting your batting order and your bowling order correct on an occasion. I don't give a shit if he smiles at press conferences or he's touchy at press conferences. Owen Morgan was always touchy at press conferences, even when England were winning, right? And I don't remember ever writing up going, that was an issue. He's just, Owen Morgan Owen Morgan doesn't like to be questioned. Owen Morgan likes to do what he does, and you have to trust that he knows what he's doing because he's done the work. And Hardik Pandya is smiling. I don't know how to respond to that, right? Because I don't give a shit if he's smiling. If he was bowling at 90 miles an hour, 88 miles an hour, and doing his job and coming in and whacking sixes, he'd be fine. He can smile out his arsehole then, as far as I'm concerned. It's just, I understand why you're asking it, but I don't know how to answer it, I suppose is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, this made the cut for the show when I didn't have any topics for uncovered.
I think it's an interesting one because I think there are a lot of fans, and obviously KP's talked about it. But do you understand my point? There was a great comedy article written a couple of years ago about politicians, right? And it was writing about politicians the same way that sports fans and sports media talk about their athletes. And it was a whole thing about commenting about how people went between rooms. right? Like he went from this cabinet room to this office, and this is how he walked. And for a moment, he sat there and scratched. And it really did change the way I thought about sports writing. And, you know, it's probably one of the reasons I went into data a little bit more. That's not to say those things don't sometimes mean anything, right? But it's a bit like you and I have talked about this a lot. Someone loses a family member, and the next thing they want to do is play a game of cricket. And everyone's like, oh, great, good on them. But actually, it might just be that's how they grieve. And the other person's like, I'm going to need 3 months off. I'm really not in a state and I'm not ready to go. You know, there's a big thing with police officers where they make a lot of assumptions when it comes to partners in murders based on how upset they are when they find out that their partner is done. Completely oblivious to the fact that shock hits people in many different ways, right? And so everything I've just said, if he was playing good cricket, who gives a shit if he's smiling at a press conference, right? You only care because he's losing and getting booed. He might have been like that at previous press conferences and no one was watching.
Yeah, I mean, this is coming from the guy who said that 100-meter sixes should be 12s. But anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on to the last topic of the day in this Uncovered episode, and it's a sad one. It's a somber note on which we'll end today. Derek Underwood, slow left armour for England, played 86 test matches and took 297 wickets. In test cricket, is the leading spin bowling wicket taker for England in the format, and he took all of those wickets at 26 or under 26 apiece, which is quite remarkable. He passed away at the age of 78, and while I haven't watched him bowl, Jared, what I do know about Derek Underwood is that he needs to thank Alan Knott for a lot of those wickets, and also that he had a long run up and was fairly faster in the air. So what can you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, in an era where we had players like Bisham Beatty, if you go back and watch Bisham Beatty, he doesn't look like anything like modern cricket. And Deadly was probably someone who would fit in. In fact, I think he'd be a fantastic modern day bowler probably in India and the UAE specifically. Whereas weirdly enough, he was quite adept at changing the way he bowled. And when he went to Asia, he actually bowled a lot slower originally. But he also had success in Australia. He's interesting because he's probably the last great wet wicket bowler that we had. And that during his career, that became less and less important because by the end of his career, wickets were covered. And so we no longer had that anymore. And so that bowler, we don't even talk about wet wicket bowlers anymore. Like it's not a phrase that you or I would ever use. And really in our lifetime, right? You know, it's that, 1982, Deadly retires and that's pretty much it. Look, he had some controversy in his career at times. Obviously, he played in South Africa with the Rebel in the Rebel cricket, so that was quite a big issue. From that point of view, purely as a bowler, I think he's the best spinner that England have ever had. Him, Laker, and Swan all have various claims on that title in different eras, slightly overlapping in some cases. But I do think that Underwood was absolutely magnificent. But he was a very, very bowler of his time. But weirdly enough, cricket has changed so much that probably the way he bowls so quick and accurate at the stumps, if you want to compare him to anyone, he probably, if he was bowling now, would be like a shorter version of Akshar Patel. Would be my guess if he played today. That's how he would bowl. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. There's a great story, and I can't remember the test match. I want to say it's in the late 70s. And they were trying to beat Australia in a test match, and the crowd got involved with getting the pitch ready, getting the outfield ready because it was wet, because they knew that if he got out there, he would absolutely steamroll Australia. And I believe he did do that. He was just unplayable on those kinds of wickets. Imagine now what we would be thinking if an England spinner took almost 300 wickets at 25 or 26 or whatever his average was. Like, yeah, we would be shocked. I think is the first way of putting that, right. Like we would be absolutely shocked if he came through and we saw something like that from him. So yeah.
I mean, when I saw the record, I was a bit shocked. But quickly, tell me if you had to rank the top 3 English spinners post Laker, and Graham Swan is probably number 1. Would Underwood be number 2?
Yeah, I don't know. The thing I would say about Underwood was he he was brilliant in Australia, and Swan was a holding bowler in Australia. So the only place that Underwood really struggled was the West Indies. And I think it's only, I'm just trying to look it up now, it was only from a handful of tests. He didn't take a lot of wickets in Pakistan, but he was fine in Pakistan. He took 54 wickets at 26 in India, and had a record of 27 away and 24 at home. So I talk about him being a wicket bowler. In England he was, but everywhere else he was something else. I think he was more versatile than Swan. I wonder if Swan's best delivery wasn't better than him. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because you got one guy who's a wet wicket bowler, and that's his era. And then you've got another guy who's a DRS bowler, and that's his era. And so, so it sort of depends on where you go. But I think you would pick Swan as a cricketer because of his slogging with his batting and his fielding. I think that's probably fair. But I think if you're going a specialist bowler, I think Underwood probably still takes him. And as I said, I think he's quite variable in the kinds of ways that he could bowl, whereas I don't think Swan was quite that level of player in those days. Sorry, in his career, I should say.
That is quite fascinating. Anyway, last super chat of the day, Path right winger with his third super chat overall. Between overthrows and uncovered. He says, I don't like Hardik's obsession with his price, but the fans are treating him like butt. How do bigger sports leagues handle such situations? Do fans handle it differently? Early 2000s, Path, you would know because you're a right winger. I'm assuming that's a football pun. But one of the best footballers that Portugal has ever produced, Luis Figo, he used to play for Barcelona, and he moved to arch rivals Real Madrid. And that is the El Clasico, as you might know. And he was on the corner post, about to take a corner, and someone tossed a severed pig's head at him. So yeah, this is not the worst thing in the world that's happening to Hardik Pandya. I'm not for the abuse, but the boos are part and parcel of the sport, or any sport.
I remember the Australian team getting really upset when Warner and Smith came back in England. And I was told this by so many people. They were like, I can't believe you're not writing about the boos. And I was like, they got caught tampering with the ball. And this is the first time they've played England since. They're going to get booed. I remember Michael Clarke got booed Melbourne and Sydney before he became captain. He was so unpopular. I was at a Surrey game when Rory Hamilton-Brown was booed by his home fans. So it's not the first time I've seen this in cricket. As I said, I think cricket is becoming, and this is not just cricket, but cricket, specifically right at the moment in front of my face, is becoming a lot more personality driven. And I think because of that, you have a situation where a lot of people are Rohit fans rather than Mumbai fans, and a lot of people are Mumbai fans. Hardik has come in and been dropped into this side. Clearly, there is fractions from within the group, from what I'm hearing. And then on top of it, they're not winning, and the captain's not playing well, and he's making, weird decisions. But I'll tell you the same thing I told a friend of mine in Australia when he said that that's it, Warner's done. Australians will never love him anymore. I said, the next time Warner makes an iconic innings in Australia, the crowd will go absolutely nuts and they will forget every single thing he's done. And the next time he made that big score against Pakistan, I sent my mate all the articles, one after the other. Fans do this all the time, right? They turn on their players and then they get better. Different fan bases do it in different ways. Some fan bases never turn on their players, and that's the annoying thing, right? But we see this sort of stuff all the time. The truth is, none of this would be a problem if they weren't losing, right? Yeah. It basically comes down to that. At a certain point, if they were winning, Mumbai fans would have something else to have a look at. I remember that season when KKR had Owen Morgan as their captain, and all the KKR fans were telling me that Owen Morgan was a terrible captain. Lads, he's just won a World Cup. Right? He's just revolutionized white ball cricket. You could tell me that KKR is losing. You could even tell me that he's not a great captain. But to say he's a bad captain, I think would be an insane comment. But what did they see? Their team was playing terrible and he wasn't making any runs. Sometimes these things happen.
I'll tell you what, Sunny G is also pissed, and he's an unapologetic Mumbai fan. and he's not having any of it. He's not liking Pandya as captain, so that probably doesn't help either.
He's not captaining well. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that is fair to say. There's do you remember when Rishabh Pant became captain a couple of years ago, and he kept getting the maths wrong on when he was using his bowlers. It's very rare you see a captain at that level miscount overs, right? Hardik Pandya has not done that, but he's got the batting lineup wrong 3 or 4 times. The bowling, it's really hard because they're not bowling very well, but he is making mistakes with the bowling as well and the way he's putting it together. The team looks fractured. The team had a captain that they liked. They don't really understand why they've had to do this. As I said, though, let's say they had won some of those games that they've been in front of and they're 4-2. No one would care about all this, mate. That is the truth. When it comes to sports, when a team is losing, we worry about body language. We worry about captaincy. We worry about how much he's getting paid. We worry if they're winning. And if you want the best example of this in cricket, Brendan McCullum basically stuck the knife into Ross Taylor to get him out of the captaincy. And I don't think I've seen many cricket nations turn on their captain more than Brendan McCullum did. They weren't doing that by the end.
Definitely not. And on that note, let's call it a day on Uncovered. For those of you in the comments section, thank you so much for joining us. And if you like this video, give us a like on YouTube and subscribe to both this channel and Jared's other channel on YouTube.
The other video is up. So if you haven't had enough of me and Bayram's not on the other one, but in spirit, he's always there. But if you haven't had enough of me, the other video about how to almost make 300 in an IPL game is now up on the main channel.
Yeah, and if you're ever confused where to find all of our content, whether it be written pieces, videos, or podcasts, go to goodareas.co and bookmark that website, because that is your one-stop shop for all the work that we do over here. And yeah, thanks for joining, guys. We'll see you next week for another episode of Uncovered. That is all for today. Goodbye.
Support us on Patreon and help us keep making our content. Join for exclusive perks like the AMAs, the live calls, and to chat with me directly on Discord. You can also enjoy ad-free content, early podcasts, and access to my emailer. Step up your cricket-style game with Bodyline t-shirts. Explore their exclusive player-themed t-shirts, including favourites like Virat Kohli, Kane Williamson, and Ben Stokes. They also have team-inspired designs and options for hardcore cricket nerds. Their collection offers something unique for every fan.